Chapter 121, Educating Shirahoshi. Ah, Brother Kane, did you kill him? Shirahoshi stared at Vander Deckenines, who lay motionless on the ground. Her small, pouty mouth trembled, and huge eyes filled with tears, as if they might spill at any moment. Someone who had been tormenting her for 3 years, had suddenly vanished. Even after all he'd done, the shock was too much. Stop crying. Kane's voice cut through the air, suddenly stern where it had been gentle a moment before. The rebuke startled everyone nearby. Shirahoshi flinched like a frightened creature, her enormous body shuddering. She sniffed, shoulders quivering, but somehow forced the tears back. Her eyes stayed red and pleading. Kane's expression softened, but his tone stayed firm. Shirahoshi, it's all right to be scared. That just means you have a kind heart. But you have to understand, weakness lets your enemies hurt the people you love. She bowed her head in silence. Young as she wasn't foolish. She knew how much her father, her brothers, her ministers, and soldiers had risked and endured because of Vanderdecken Ninth. That was why she had hidden herself away in the hard-shell tower for so long, out of fear that her own fragility would bring trouble to everyone. You must grow strong and train, Kane continued. You are the princess of Ryugu Kingdom. You carry your family's love and the hopes of 5 million people on Fishman Island. A child who cries at every fear cannot shoulder that. As Poseidon, Shirahoshi could summon and command sea kings, but if her body was too fragile, a single strike could end her life. At the very least, she needed to hold on long enough for help to arrive. Shirahoshi lifted her head, jaw set, determination gathering on her round face. She clenched her enormous hand into a fist and, voice still trembling, tried to sound resolute. I understand, Brother Kane. I won't cry like that anymore. No. Kane shook his head, surprising her. He reached out and gently patted her huge crimson tail, smiling when she looked up. You can cry when you need to. Tears aren't always weakness. True courage is wiping away those tears and still finding a way to face danger and protect others. Really? Her face brightened like sunlight through clouds. She offered him a solemn, tiny pinky finger. Brother Kane, I promise. I won't cry so easily just because I'm scared. I'll work hard and grow strong. Kane hooked his pinky with hers and made a vow of his own. I promise, Shirahoshi. One day, I'll make it possible for every citizen of Fishman Island, every fishman and mermaid, to walk freely in the sun and set foot on land. As if on cue, a single beam of sunlight slanted through a window and fell on them both, illuminating their faces. Dust motes hung in the light like a painting. The scene had a timeless quality that made King Neptune stare, frozen. A promise between a human and a mermaid princess? The sight shook the king. He couldn't help but recall the old family legend, Joy Boy and a mermaid princess. Even the words of Kane's promise echoed the centuries-old prophecy. Jinbe, who had never heard the royal version, was stunned too. This was what Brother Tiger had dreamed of, humans, fishmen, and merfolk breaking down old barriers and living together. Could it really happen now? Jinbe didn't know, but he felt that Kane had taken a first, meaningful step. Later, in a private reception room of Ryugu Palace, Kane laid everything out plainly. The mermaid princess from the prophecy is Shirahoshi. Jinbe blinked in surprise. Neptune's relief was tempered by worry. He had suspected as much since Shirahoshi first called down sea kings at 6 years old. She was likely the Poseidon who appears once every 800 years. Kane recounted Joy Boy's story and the old songs. When he finished, Jinbe said slowly, Then are you the one who carries Joy Boy's will? Kane shook his head. No, I'm not Joy Boy, and I don't want to pretend to be him. Impersonating Joy Boy might have won him goodwill from powerful races, but Kane refused. Whoever defeats Emu and liberates the world needn't be called Joy Boy. I want to do it on my own terms. Neptune and Jinbe shared private looks, thinking Kane might indeed be this era's Joy Boy, but they did not press the matter. Kane dropped another bombshell. Shirahoshi is the legendary Poseidon. For her safety, you can't just hide her and hope for the best. She needs to learn to defend herself and to master her powers. This ability will play a key role in the upheaval the world will face, Kane said. Both Neptune and Jinbe grew solemn. I understand, Neptune said. Jinbe, the king continued, I'm entrusting you with training my daughter in self-defense. There was no one stronger or more trustworthy on Fishman Island than Jinbe. He accepted immediately. I will start planning her training tomorrow, he said. Kane's gaze hardened. And this must be kept absolutely secret. No one can know that Shirahoshi is Poseidon, not the princes, not anyone. If the world government learns, they might send an admiral to lock down and neutralize her. I'm not exaggerating. Neptune and Jinbei felt a chill at the gravity in Kane's voice and nodded gravely. After saying his farewells, Kane and Jinbei left the audience chamber together. Kane, Jinbei called after a pause in the corridor, reluctant. Why tell me this? You know my connections with the Whitebeard pirates. Kane stopped and pointed two fingers at him. First, I needed you to understand how important Shirahoshi is, and to treat her as such. Even if Fishman Island fell, she must not be harmed. Second, because I trust you. Jinbei let the words sink in. Trust was a rare thing on the Grand Line. He watched Kane walk away down the ornate corridor and muttered, Kane, bold, admirable man. The next morning, Kane woke refreshed in a guest room at Ryugu Palace. He threw open the heavy curtains. Sunlight flooded the room. Another beautiful day, he said, stretching. A pair of slender arms emerged from under the duvet, then a head of short pink hair and those distinctive curly eyebrows peeking out. Kane patted over with a teasing grin and ruffled the blanket. Wake up, sleepyhead. Humph, Reiju said, half asleep, half annoyed. You were too much last night. Yamato came bouncing in, full of energy. Kane, let's go explore. She'd swapped her usual kimono for a loose white cropped hoodie and denim shorts, eager to see more of the island. Where to? To that big ship, of course. Ever since glimpsing the colossal vessel docked in Fishman District, a ship almost as large as a small island, Yamato had been itching to investigate. Reiju finished getting ready, and together with Kane, they went to the palace dining room for breakfast. Kane gave everyone the day off and handed out extra spending money to enjoy Fishman Island. He also distributed a detailed sightseeing map Neptune had prepared, with Mermaid Cove, Coral Hill, and the Marine Shopping Center marked clearly. Groups formed quickly, Violet with Reiju, Robin with Kozuki Hiyori, Kuma with his daughter, Ace with Zoro and Sanji. Kane naturally paired with Yamato, and their destination was Fishman District, to see the giant ship Noah. On the way through the palace grounds, they passed a spacious practice square. Shirahoshi, in a training uniform, was under Jinbei's watchful eye, learning the stances of Fishman karate. Nearby, the three mermaid princes were also training with determination, perhaps a decoy to avoid drawing suspicion. Brother Kane, Shirahoshi called, but kept her posture steady. Keep going, Kane smiled and waved encouragement. In Fishman District, the pair were greeted with cheers and respectful calls. Fishmen in the streets, some who had already registered with the Beast's pirates and some still undecided, saluted them with pride. After answering greetings and handling a few quick matters, Kane and Yamato pushed deeper into the district until they reached Noah, the massive ship that had captured Yamato's curiosity. Chapter 122, Shiarly's Fortune-Telling, Return Voyage. The tour of the giant ship Noah wrapped up quickly. The vessel itself held few secrets. It was simply an impossibly large ark, able to carry all the residents of Fishman Island to a new home. Yamato wandered around with enthusiasm for a short while, but once the novelty wore off, she found it a little dull. Let's go, Kane suggested at the right moment. Let's head to Coral Hill. I heard there's a mermaid cafe there, and the owner Shiarly's fortune-telling is said to be incredibly accurate. Shiarly the mermaid was one of the people he most wanted to see on Fishman Island. Her track record was uncanny. At 3, she predicted the Sea Kings waiting for the birth of a mermaid princess. At 4, she foretold the coming of the Great Pirate Era. Later, she foresaw the Marineford War and Whitebeard's death. She had even told Roger's fortune back when she predicted the mermaid princess. If her reputation was true, meeting her was a must. Fortune-telling? Yamato's eyes lit up. Let's go! Let's go! They hurried to Coral Hill, a bustling port town southeast of Fishman Island, with shops lining the streets and people everywhere. Rather than heading straight to the cafe, Kane and Yamato followed the sightseeing route Neptune had recommended, stopping at several well-known spots. The most beautiful was Merlin Cove, a neighborhood where many mermaids lived. Graceful mermaid ladies were everywhere, and the scenery was lovely, but their company was the real sight. Yamato, however, was determined to keep Kane from lingering among the alluring common beauties and dragged him away before he could get too distracted. Even a battle-loving soul like Yamato couldn't escape the feminine genetic pull toward shopping. She was drawn to novel underwater specialties, glowing pearls, and delicate shellcrafts, slipping into a full-on buy mode. By the time they reached the Mermaid Cafe, both of them were laden with shopping bags and evening was falling. They ran into Kazuki Hiyori and her three companions at the entrance, each with their own pile of purchases. Hiyori explained they were here for Shiarli's fortune-telling. Eating was secondary. The mermaid waitresses were used to that. 9 out of 10 guests came for the owner's prophecies, the rest came to admire the pretty mermaids, and hardly anyone came only to eat. Lord Kane, Lady Yamato, what would you like? A pretty white-skinned fishman waitress smiled and handed them menus. After their recent exploits, they were well known on Fishman Island. The staff recognized them. Kane ordered specialty cakes, rare underwater fruits, and a variety of shell dishes. Since it was a mermaid-run cafe, there were no fish or meat options. 3 portions of each, then. 3 for everyone, he said. The waitress blinked. She had never seen anyone order like that, but the customer was the king, so she dutifully relayed it to the kitchen. Soon the mermaid waitresses were stunned by Kane and Yamato's appetites. They had never seen humans eat so much. Plates seemed to vanish in another dimension. The girls ran back and forth between kitchen and dining room, exhausted, just trying to keep up with the 2 guests. Delicious! Yamato slammed down the last empty plate and patted her stomach. Kane wiped his mouth with a napkin and leaned toward the counter. Is Madame Shirley available? Are you looking for me? Came a voice. A larger-than-average blue shark mermaid stepped forward, pipe in hand, a dark purple hooded top covering one side of her face. She had short black hair that fell over her right eye and a pale skin tone that gave her an unapproachable air. She didn't rise to flattery. Madam Shirley, I apologize, that's my mistake. Miss Shirley, Kane corrected quickly. He hadn't expected a reaction to the title. Shirley, despite her reputation, was only 22. Madam was inappropriate. Her expression softened slightly at his honest, easy manner. Are you here for fortune-telling? She asked. Shirley had grown to resent her gift, having seen too many grim futures, but not every customer was the same. Kane smiled warmly. The mermaid waitresses around stifled quiet gasps at his handsome grin. Even Shirley felt her pale cheeks warm a little. She reached under the counter and produced a crystal ball, setting it on a dark velvet cushion. Yamato leaned in, curious. It looked like any ordinary crystal ball. Shirley smirked. It's just a street shop crystal you could buy for 3,000 berries. If you like, I'll give it to you after the reading. Her sight was the real medium. The ball only focused it. Yamato lost interest at that and drifted away. Shirley inhaled, put her hands above the crystal, and moved them in a precise, irregular pattern. Then she gasped. Her composure broke for a moment. Her cool gray eyes trembled. She suddenly stared at Kane as if seeing him anew. What did you see? He asked, intrigued. It felt like a glimpse into something massive. Shirley was silent for a long beat as she gathered the shattered images. Because Kane was the anchor, other powerful figures flickered through her vision like fragments, the scale of them staggering. 4 emperors, admirals, and gigantic monsters like moving mountains. What kind of war would call forth so many top-tier fighters at once? War, she said finally, voice dry. A sweeping war. Countless terrifying powerhouses fighting over a battlefield of ruins, and you facing someone cloaked in a black robe. Who else was fighting? Kane pressed. The black-robed figure was likely Emu, that much he suspected. He wanted to know who would stand in that last battle. Shirley listed the names that flashed at the edges. Kaido, Shanks, Akainu, and some monsters. She added quickly, they only flashed at the frame's edge. That only means they were present. It doesn't give details. That would be enough. As long as he was there when it mattered. Kane nodded. Anything else? Shirley hesitated, then continued. You became enormous, your body blotting out the sky. Above your head there was an enormous diamond. Your beast form was similar to what you showed in Fishman District, but not identical. Most striking were 2 light band whiskers on either side of your head, like dragon whiskers, glowing with a sacred light. Unsure if words were enough, She found a pen and sketched a few rough lines on a scrap of paper, pushing the quick drawing toward Kane. He studied it in silence. Mega evolution, Dynamax, terastallization. Could all those traits appear together? He thought back to changes he had made in his past life and chuckled inwardly at the thought of Nintendo banning him. Jokes aside, the image filled him with a solid, steady assurance. Even without mastering those transformations, he was strong enough to contend with the Emperors. If he could gather them all, Imu wouldn't have an easy win. Yamato, impatient, shoved Kane aside and barreled in front of Shirley. "My turn! Look at mine!" Shirley didn't refuse. One more reading or two made no difference. She rubbed the ball again. This time, no terrible vision assaulted her. "Congratulations to the two of you." She looked first at Yamato, then at Kane, and couldn't stop the small, half-knowing smile that tugged at her lips. Kane smiled back in bewilderment. "Eh?" Yamato blinked, perplexed. Kane leaned in and murmured a few words into her ear. Instead of blushing, Yamato looked as if it were obvious. She said without hesitation, "We're definitely getting married in the future." Kane pressed a hand to his forehead, helpless. Yamato had no filter. The mermaid waitresses who had been eavesdropping covered their mouths and giggled. "What a perfect couple," they murmured, but not everyone found it amusing. Violet, Kozuki Hiyori, Reiju, and Robin nearby all fell silent, then rose together and approached the counter. Hiyori kept her voice steady. "Miss Shirley, please read my fortune as well." Shirley hovered her hands over the ball again. When she looked up, her expression was peculiar. Her gaze flicked between Kane and Hiyori, as if she'd seen something she couldn't quite believe. After a long pause, she said, "Also, congratulations to you two." Hiyori's tension melted into relief. At least Kane hadn't abandoned her in the future. One by one, Shirley read for Violet, Reiju, and Robin. Each time she saw the same recurring image, Kane as the center. When Shirley began to doubt her own sense, had she read too many fortunes today? The answers didn't change. The women left with differing emotions, but each carried the same small solace. Kane would give them an explanation when the time came. When she finished the last reading, Shirley wiped the crystal ball with a clean handkerchief, as if cleaning some greasy residue from her sight. Her gaze toward Kane had shifted from reverence to a faint disdain. Pure playboy, she thought. Kane could only shrug inwardly. He was a playboy, yes, but his feelings for each woman were sincere, genuine. Duan Yu was his role model. 3 days later, they prepared to depart. Fishman Island's port bustled with farewells. Neptune's family had come to see them off. Goodbye, Big Brother Kane, and all the big brothers and sisters. Shirahoshi couldn't hold back. Glittering tears rolled down like pearls. They had only spent a few days together, but they had formed a deep bond with Neptune's family. "Don't be sad. Didn't we swap Den Mushi numbers? Call us anytime you miss us," Kane said, patting the large, bright red mermaid tail resting beside him. "Definitely," Shirahoshi nodded, sniffling and extending her pinky. Kane touched it lightly with his own. After Shirahoshi said goodbye to everyone, King Neptune stepped forward and put the island's people in Kane's care. "Lord Kane, I entrust my people to you." "Don't worry," Kane said, tapping his chest. "They are my people now. I will be responsible." With farewells complete, Kane and his group set off. Fishman Island had nothing left to hold them. Their return voyage had begun. Chapter 123, Return to Wano Country, the Vanished Island. The refitted Rayquaza eased away from Fishman Island's dreamy harbor and began to climb. On the deck, Robin held a folder and gave Kane a concise rundown of the recruitment results. "Lord Kane, when recruitment ended, we took in a total of 1,203 male fishmen, 123 female fishmen, 254 male merfolk, and 56 female merfolk." "Oh," Kane's eyebrows rose in surprise. "That's far more than I expected. Even female merfolk came with us?" Female merfolk were highly prized on the slave market. Ordinary fishmen fetched only around 1,000,000 berries as a baseline, roughly the same for most male merfolk, but a beautiful female merfolk could soar past 70 million. For that reason, they were the most ruthlessly hunted and rarely left the protection of Fishman Island. "A lot came with their families," Robin said, "and some were rescued from a fishman's slave-catching crew that captured merfolk to sell to humans. They've lost faith in Fishman Island and want to try their luck at sea." The discovery had been accidental. The Beast's pirates' wide recruitment drive had unexpectedly exposed a slave-catching team hiding in the back alleys of the Fishman district. What outraged Robin most was that the fishman who led the traffickers had defended his actions by saying, "If I don't take them, other human slavers will. Why shouldn't I make the money?" The betrayal of one's own kind for profit stirred a raw anger in her. She had known deception since she was 8, and every mention of it unsettled her. Kane was silent for a beat, then let out a low sigh. Every people have those who break their own bottom line. To his dismay, investigation showed the 3-man slaving crew were all former members of the Sun Pirates, the very crew that once fought to free slaves. Heroes who had turned into monsters. He shook his head and moved on, turning to Jack at his side. "When we return to Wano, you two handle selection and reorganization. Jack, pick the elites and set up a fishman combat unit." He glanced at Kawamatsu. "Kawamatsu, manage the rest. Those unsuited for combat and their families. Assign them work." Not every fishman or merfolk was fit to fight. Those who wanted a quiet life or were skilled craftsmen would be better off with the honest, steady Kawamatsu. After days of cramped, gloomy sea travel, the giant hull of the Rayquaza finally breached the surface and was washed in bright sunlight. The deck erupted. "Sunlight! Surface sunlight! It's so warm! Mama, look! Real clouds! White clouds! The sea! I'm here at last!" Fishmen and merfolk stared greedily at the blue sky, inhaling the saline, liberating air so different from the deep. Some wept. The instinctive longing for land, for sunlight and freedom, was lodged in their genes. Many dove into the clear water and swam and leaped on the surface, reveling in the open sea. Even hardened Fishman district toughs wore childlike grins. Kane leaned against the railing and watched. A faint smile touched his lips. He'd done something good this time. Wano loomed ahead. The new arrivals gaped at towering cliffs that pierced the clouds and thunderous waterfalls plunging into the inland sea. Above the deep ocean, such fierce, rugged scenery could not exist on Fishman Island. Thinking about making this home, their hearts swelled with expectation. The Rayquaza threaded through an underwater approach, took the massive elevator, and docked at Onigashima's port. The Beast Pirates cheered their returning flagship. Kane waved back, but the fishmen and merfolk grew nervous when they saw the Beast Pirates, so fierce and wild, they suddenly realized they had arrived at the Emperor's stronghold. Jack stepped forward. "Don't slump now. Don't make me lose face." "Yes, Boss Jack." Surprisingly, the fishmen straightened up at his roar and lifted their arms in agreement. Kane watched his brother with approval. As expected of the leader he'd chosen for the fishman unit, Jack had made these fishmen from the district fall in line. Kawamatsu played good cop, soothing the anxieties of the women and children. In just a few days, his honest, reliable manner had won most immigrants' trust. After everyone disembarked, Kane met King, who'd been informed and was waiting ashore. "Mr. King, have their accommodations been arranged?" Housing had to be tackled first. King nodded. "I sent people to survey the inland sea ruins. They're ancient but well-preserved. Having been submerged for so long protected them. Still, they'll need internal renovation and modification." "Then let them do it," Kane said matter-of-factly. Free housing would make the fishmen and merfolk invest themselves in the work. King glanced over the new arrivals and gave a rare nod of approval. "Good. With these people, we won't have to worry about underwater threats anymore." Red-haired Shanks, Big Mom, and Whitebeard all had fishman units. On the seas, a reliable fishman force was a huge strategic advantage. The Beast's pirates had finally filled that gap. Kane watched the newcomers explore their future home. This is only the beginning. If these newcomers live well and their livelihoods are secure, more will come. It might even be possible to move the whole of Fishman Island here eventually. King frowned. "How do you plan to handle and settle so many people?" Housing wasn't the issue. The inland sea was vast. But the Beast's pirates weren't a charity. They couldn't support everyone, and it was unrealistic to turn them all into pirates. "You don't need to worry." Kane tapped his fingers and outlined a plan. "Those strong and willing to fight join the crew. The less able can work in factories or mine deep-sea ores." He even had a large plan for Dendenmushi Enterprises if Tesoro's arrangements worked out. Wano had a small population by his lights. In an economy of labor-intensive industries, People were the greatest resource. He wanted to ease Wano's burden and encourage more births. King studied him. If you carry this out step by step, the Beast Pirates may no longer be merely a pirate crew. You'd be operating them like a real state. Kane met his gaze. Is that a problem, Mr. King? Relying on looting and pillage limits how far we can develop. To support bigger dreams, we need a steadier foundation and more output. King fell silent for a moment, forced to acknowledge the long-term benefits of Kane's vision. But then his tone grew practical. Mr. Kane, the initial settlement of these fishmen and merfolk will be under my overall coordination. Kane explained, dividing the immigrants. Jack would manage combat personnel, Kawamatsu the non-combatants. King accepted it without objection. I'll inform everyone, no member of the Beast Pirates is to intentionally harm them. Anyone who does will die. Kane grinned. What the fishmen and merfolk wanted was not privileges, but the chance to live as equals. He wouldn't create racial favoritism. Ensuring a stable, abuse-free environment was the fullest preferential treatment he could offer. Those who sought trouble and broke Beast Pirates' rules would not receive special protection. There's one more important matter, King said, and his voice carried a rare edge of annoyance. He delivered terrible news. What? What do you mean? Riskina Island flew away. Kane's eyes widened. Riskina Island, near Wano, an important island torn from their backyard? If word got out, Big Mom and Shanks would mock them. Unbelievable as it sounded, it was true. On the day of the incident, Mr. Kaido wasn't on Onigashima, King said helplessly. Kaido had a habit for ropeless bungee jumping and had gone off in some whim to find a fresh spot for his latest stunt. He hadn't returned. Who did it? Kane demanded. King shook his head. I don't know, but it's highly likely connected to Golden Lion. A night watchman had thought he'd been dreaming when he saw an island flying through the sky. By morning, the island was gone. There were very few people capable of moving an island. Golden Lion was the likeliest suspect. So we go to war with Golden Lion? Kane said, his suspicion locked on. Whether or not Golden Lion was guilty, they needed to find him. They were pirates, not judges. They didn't need a court to act. King couldn't contact Kaido and needed Kane to locate Golden Lion and find out what happened. Riskina Island could not simply vanish. Kane took the mission without hesitation. In his memory, the crippled Golden Lion wasn't all that threatening. He'd been defeated by Gear 2nd Luffy in a movie, so the real challenge would be locating a flying island in an endless sky. With Kozuki Hiyori and Violet on hand, finding Golden Lion wasn't impossible. But first, there was another task. Queen's lab. Damn it, Kane. What do you want me to research now? Queen pushed his goggles up and grumbled. Kane ticked off his requests. Underwater weapons for the Fishman unit, specialized underwater mining tools and equipment. Queen's face twitched. He'd hold his nose and research weapons. Unpleasant, but within his wheelhouse. Mining equipment, on the other hand? I'm a weapons and chemistry expert, he snapped. I'm not here to design civilian machinery. He stamped his foot metaphorically. No, I won't do it, even if you kill me. You insult my craft. You insult my technology. This time, Queen was adamant. Whatever Kane said, he wasn't going to take on that job. Chapter 124, The Proactive Queen. Is that so? Then I'll have Judge take charge of designing the underwater equipment. What a pity. If this task were done well, Mr. Kaido would praise him to the skies. Building up a powerful fishman contingent is one of his top priorities right now. Kane Lando feigned disappointment, playing the judge card with practiced skill. I refuse. Good. Wait. Kane's prepared lines choked off. This wasn't in the script. You brat, that trick doesn't work on me anymore. Queen's expression went smug as he twirled his iconic mustache and sneered. I won't fall for the same ploy twice. The real reason he resisted was simpler. Underwater weapons sounded dull compared to the new playgrounds and laser weapons he was dreaming up. If he could perfect those, Kaido's admiring gaze would be locked onto him, no question. He couldn't give that up. Miscalculation, Kane muttered inwardly. He hadn't expected a scientist to take an interest in logistics and strategy over pure tech. Still, he had one last card. Never mind, then. As he turned to leave, he let a stray remark slip. Looks like all the mermaid ladies' gratitude and admiration will go to Judge. Mermaids? Queen's smile froze. Wait, you brought mermaids too? Kane paused, a faint smile crossing his face as if revealing a trivial detail. About 50 of them, and if they settle in Wano Country, that number will grow. 50 beautiful, rare mermaids, and more to come? Queen's eyes went wide. If I help research underwater equipment and build them beautiful new homes, won't they admire me? Be grateful to me? He let himself picture it. Legions of sweet-voiced mermaid ladies doting on him. His imagination ran riot. Lord Queen, try this honey tangerine I peeled. And me, Lord Queen, freshly chilled deep-sea wine. Lord Queen, could you sing another song for us? All right, one at a time. Seeing Queen's eyes glaze and a faint drool appear at the corner of his mouth, Kane knew the matter was settled. Queen's lust for fame and flattery had won. Kane pushed his last lure. Think about the Fire Festival finale. Imagine an entire mermaid dance troupe for your concert, full of charm and grace. Who among the beast's pirates could steal your thunder then? It would be an unprecedented show. Queen visibly brightened. A mermaid dance troupe was something he'd never had. A single mermaid could fetch tens of millions of berries on the black market. A whole troupe was unimaginable. His current human dancers always felt amateur beside the image he craved. Wiping the drool from his lip, he struck a pose of righteous responsibility. Underwater weapons and underwater mining gear. Leave them all to me. Kane suppressed a laugh. Weren't you supposed to prioritize new playgrounds and laser weapons? What nonsense! Queen waved him off grandly. Those mermaids trusted the beast's pirates and came from the deep to Wano. It's our duty to make them feel at home. That's the top priority. Leave it to me. I'll start designing the plan right away. With that, Queen shoved Kane out of the lab and slammed the door. Kane stood there, half laughing, half exasperated at how quickly Queen's priorities had flipped. Next, Kane Lando went to Flower Capital to hear King Riku's report. Wano's economy was improving steadily. People's lives were getting better. Social order had stabilized compared to Orochi's rule, and even the prisoners at Udon Quarry had become unexpectedly compliant under the labor point system. Mining efficiency and ore production were increasing. The only problem now, King Riku's face darkened. The breeding rate of Den Den Mushi isn't keeping up with our plan. We can only produce about 800 units every 6 months, with almost no room to improve. Kane's brow lifted. The supply of Den Den Mushi mattered not just for the commercial venture he was preparing with Tesoro, but for future wars. He took it seriously. What's causing the bottleneck? The main problem is a shortage of high-quality breeding Den Den Mushi, King Riku explained. A Den Den Mushi can be used as a communication device at 6 months, but it needs a full year to enter its prime breeding period. Despite appearing like snails, Den Den Mushi had very low reproductive rates. One mating usually produced only 2 or 3 eggs, and not all of them hatched, like giant pandas. That rarity made them valuable across the seas. King Riku hesitated, then offered a cautious suggestion. If we stop exports temporarily— No, Kane cut him off. At the current pace, he already felt sales were too slow to pause. There was no choice but to find a faster fix, preferably using devil fruit ability. Which devil fruit could solve this? He thought for a moment, then brightened. Of course. Find Denjiro, he ordered. Denjiro, who patrolled Flower Capital, came at once. You know Shinobu, right? Kane got straight to the point. Denjiro's heart lurched and cold sweat formed on his back. How did Kane know about Shinobu? He tried to deny it, but Kane wouldn't play games. I need her frillish devil fruit power. Bring her to me. If you warn her and she escapes— Kane leaned forward, eyes like flames. You know the consequences. Denjiro felt the pressure like a mountain and bowed his head. I understand. I'll handle it. He had no choice but to find Shinobu. Fortunately, after re-emerging under his true identity, Denjiro had indeed had secret contact with her. He set off. Follow him. If Shinobu refuses to come, do what you must. Kane murmured as if to himself. Understood, Lord Kane Lando, came a low voice. Fukurokuju emerged from the shadows and accepted the order, melting back into darkness. Wano was a treasure trove. Devil fruits that were rare elsewhere were relatively abundant here and could be put to many uses. Why not use Bonnie's age fruit to speed maturity? Kane had reasons not to. Bonnie was young, and her control was unstable. She could accidentally overage and kill the fragile Den Den Mushi. Besides, the age effect was temporary. He couldn't have Bonnie touching every Den Mushi every day. Shinobu, with her frillish ability, offered a more reliable solution. Denjiro returned within an hour with Shinobu. She was a short, stout kunoichi, her proportions exaggerated and her figure altered. Oda's dark humor, Kane thought. She spoke with clear reluctance. "You're Kane, Lando? What do you want with me?" If Denjiro hadn't persuaded her to wait for the liberation Lady Kozuki Toki prophesied, she wouldn't have come. Kane didn't care that she resisted. For a loyal retainer of Odin to remain restrained instead of attacking was already notable. "I need your frillish devil fruit ability to ripen the Den Mushi." "My frillish ability? You mean my mature woman seduction technique?" Shinobu replied, puzzled. "Yes. What you call a special ninjutsu is, in the outside world, a devil fruit ability," Kane explained. "Do you accept?" She laughed bitterly. "Do I have a choice?" Her eyes flicked to Fukurokuju, who had silently appeared at the doorway and blocked her path. "Obey Lord Kane Lando's request. This is penance for betraying the Omnioban," Fukurokuju scolded. "Humph. Orochi stole the throne. He doesn't deserve my loyalty," Shinobu spat. "Enough. No need to bring up old grudges." Kane waved him off. He didn't care about past factions. He handed Shinobu a note after writing an order. "Since you'll work with me, you're one of us. Take this to Udon Quarry and redeem your brother, Shinobu Suke." Her brother had been captured and forced to labor at Udon. Shinobu stared at the heavy order, hardly believing it. "Aren't you afraid I'll run away with my brother?" "Trust is my style," Kane said with an air of indifference. He was confident that if she fled anywhere on Wano land, a simple order would bring them back. Shinobu gripped the paper tightly. She knew nothing came for free, but she couldn't bear to let her brother toil for 7 more years in Udon. She took a breath, and, though her voice was still cool, she spoke with new resolve. "Thank you. I'll work diligently." She decided that, as long as it didn't cross her bottom line, she would do the job. "Let's go. I'll take you to your workplace so you can get familiar with it." Kane rose, leaped onto the rooftop, and transformed into a great dragon. He scooped Shinobu up and flew toward Kibi. They arrived over a dense forest. Shinobu's eyes were caught by a massive white boar in the distance, as big as a small mountain, the mountain god. She swallowed, a flash of fear in her gaze. She had seen its rampage in Flower Capital. "Follow me," Kane said, and led her through the trees. In a few minutes, they reached the Den Mushi breeding base run by the Tontada tribe. "Kane Lando!" A chorus erupted as Tontada members appeared from every corner, rushing to greet him. Kane greeted them cheerfully. "This is a helper I found for you." He turned to Shinobu. "Your task is simple. Use your ability to help them mature the Den Mushi. They'll tell you the exact requirements." With that, Kane stepped back. With Shinobu's power added to the Tontada efforts, he was confident the Den Mushi production bottleneck would finally start to break. Chapter 125, Finding the Golden Lion. After settling everything in Wano and taking a day to rest, Kane set sail again. Before hunting down the Golden Lion, the most important thing was intelligence. The ocean was vast. Searching blindly for a floating archipelago that drifted tens of thousands of meters in the sky would be impossible. Fortunately, Kane had a good friend. "Hello, Morgans?" When it came to news of the skies, no one was better informed than Morgans, whose army of news-carrying seagulls and far-reaching networks seemed to cover every corner of the world. "Are you looking for Sky Island?" Morgans asked over the Den Mushi. "No, not Sky Island. It's an independent archipelago floating in the sky," Kane explained. "That old man, Golden Lion, stole a very important island from me. I have to go talk to him and get it back." "What? Really?" Morgan's voice shot up in pitch and excitement. Golden Lion Shiki, the pirate king of a past era and the only man to ever escape Impel Down, was involved? This was huge. Before Kane could reply, Morgans hung up and shouted to his newsroom. "Quick, quick, notify all the news seagulls. Search the skies for any floating archipelago. Any clue must be reported immediately." Kane smiled wryly at the silent Den Mushi. When it came to big news, Morgans always moved fast. He was about to order the Rayquaza to sweep several preset search areas in the Grand Line when the Den Mushi rang again. Morgan's voice poured out, almost breathless with excitement. "Found it! Little brother Kane! Found Golden Lion's territory!" It had only been 20 minutes. Morgans detailed how one of his couriers, delivering papers 3 days ago, had sold a copy to one of Golden Lion's men and overheard an address. He rattled off precise coordinates, then warned, "But my seagulls say those islands are still on the move. You must act fast or they'll drift away." "Thanks, Morgans. I owe you one." Kane smiled. "Get your best photographer and a video den mushi ready. You won't want to miss the exciting scenes coming up." "Of course," Morgans laughed, already barking orders. Kane set the phone down, a little moved. As the News King, Morgan's reach was uncanny. Even a sky-dwelling pirate like Golden Lion couldn't help but interact with his seagulls, and in doing so had exposed the rough location of his lair. Those innocuous birds were a world-spanning sky-eye. "No time to waste, let's go." Kane shifted into his beast form, seized the large ship, and lifted it into the air. Golden Lion's archipelago could move at any moment. On the deck, Kozuki Hiyori was busy as well. She formed an auspicious cloud beneath the hull, supporting most of the ship's weight and sharing the burden. With Kane and Hiyori working together, the Rayquaza shot toward the reported coordinates faster than usual. After 3 days, they crossed the red line and entered the Grand Line. "I see it!" Violet, scanning the far horizon like a living radar with her glance fruit ability, shouted. In minutes, massive islands came into view. These were nothing like the Sky Island everyone knew. Sky Island floated on a vast cloud called the White Sea and was essentially an island of cloud. The archipelago before them, however, was solid rock, soil, and vegetation, islands that defied logic and hung in the sky, clearly the product of a devil fruit. On the main island, the largest and highest of the group, Golden Lion Shiki was inspecting his proudest masterpiece. After escaping Impel Down, he had stumbled upon an island full of ferocious beasts. Driven by curiosity, he had found the cause of their savagery, a plant he called IQ. It could drive animals into a berserk state. To get his revenge on the world government, Shiki intended to study the plant, mass-produce the serum, and create legions of ferocious beasts to unleash on the East Blue. Roar! Below, in a cleared arena, a giant Masira, 30 meters tall and muscle-bound like a mountain, was rampaging. Its eyes were blood-red with murderous rage. A casual swing of its limbs shattered boulders. Golden Lion stood on a high observation deck, cigar clenched in his teeth, exhaling smoke through his nostrils. His golden hair flowed like a lion's mane. "Ja! This is the ultimate biological weapon," he cried, madness and triumph in his eyes. "Let's see how strong it really is." Beside him, Indigo, chief scientist of the Flying Pirates, face-painted white, an exaggerated blue afro, and dressed like a circus clown, responded and pressed a few buttons on a strange remote. With a thunderous boom, the giant iron gate at the edge of the arena opened. 3 mutated beasts with blood-red eyes and savage auras charged out. A terrifying octopus with massive tentacles, a tusked hippopotamus, and a scaly armored giant crocodile. They were devoid of reason, driven only to kill. The Masira did not back down. It roared, planted its hind legs, and charged. What followed stunned even the onlookers. Facing 3 opponents its size, the Masira displayed brutal, overwhelming power. A few savage punches and kicks shattered the beast's attacks and sent them reeling. The Masira grabbed the crocodile's jaws, and with a bone-crunching snap, it shattered the powerful mouth that had been its weapon. Not satisfied, the Masira hoisted the writhing crocodile overhead and tore it in 2. Blood and organs rained down. The beasts, consumed by the IQ serum's frenzy, watched without fear and surged forward. Thick tentacles wrapped around the Masira like constrictors, but the creature barely flinched. It grabbed the tentacles, ripped them off like ropes, and then drove a fist into a huge eye socket, crushing the octopus. The hippopotamus, pinned down, was pummeled into silence. Within minutes, the arena lay soaked in blood. The Masira, now the sole survivor, raised its head and locked its red eyes on Golden Lion and Indigo on the observation platform. Pure, boiling killing intent showed clearly. If it could reach them, it would shred them. The Masira leapt, climbing the sheer rock toward the platform with fingers gouging into the stone. It was only a dozen meters from the deck when Golden Lion stayed casually calm. Indigo calmly took notes, recording the Masira's astonishing bounces and aggression stats as if cataloging a specimen. Golden Lion sneered, waved his hand, and the ground below seemed to come to life. Massive rock chains burst up from the earth like coiling serpents, flung by his float devil fruit into controlled motion. The rock chains snaked toward the Masira and clamped around its limbs and neck. The beast roared and thrashed, but every struggle only tightened the bonds. The chains dragged it down, slammed it into the arena's center, and cinched it to the ground until it could no longer move. The once rampaging giant was suddenly a helpless prisoner. Golden Lion spread his arms and laughed to the sky. Jah! You see, Indigo? This is the perfect subject for the IQ serum. Mass-produce these ferocious beasts for me. Indigo, however, didn't answer in words. He waved his hands in exaggerated gestures, his face contorted in a series of pantomimes. Golden Lion frowned in annoyance. Bastard, what are you trying to say? Speak properly, damn it. He pointed at Indigo's shoes. And change those worn-out shoes. They make that squish-squish noise when you walk. Like farting. It's so annoying. It's my individuality, Captain Shiki, Indigo declared, finally pausing his gesturing and stamping his foot, which produced another loud squish. So you can talk. Golden Lion snapped, then burst into a strange rhythmic laugh. Ha! Ha! A clapping sound echoed beside them. A Masira in a pink suit clapped and laughed with them. Golden Lion's mouth dropped open. His cigar nearly slipped from his lips. Mom? Slap. Indigo, with practiced ease, slapped Golden Lion across the face. It's obviously just a Masira, he retorted loudly. Apparently, Shiki's hallucinations were not a new occurrence. Heh. Big Brother Kane, is that old man with a ship's wheel stuck on his head, looking like a ruffled rooster, the legendary Golden Lion? He looks so funny. A little girl's clear, teasing voice floated down from above. A steady, gentle male voice answered after her. Bonnie, you shouldn't be so rude about someone's appearance. Okay, Daddy. Those words made Golden Lion look up. The ridiculous expression he'd worn disappeared in an instant, replaced by shock and fury. Outside the island, a massive pirate ship rode a cloud of flames, hovering silently. Golden Lion spat, "Wave slash!" He didn't say another word. He just kicked, and a devastating golden slash tore through the sky, cleaving the air toward Rayquaza. These local pirates had some nerve, not even bothering to greet him. Kane was on the deck, shaking his head in mock disappointment. In the next second, his figure vanished from the deck and reappeared between the slash and Golden Lion. Crack. The blade crashed against Kane's chest and shattered like glass. It couldn't even budge him. How? This slash had no effect? Indigo and Masira, the pink-suited Masira among them, watched with their mouths hanging open. Kane casually patted his chest as if brushing dust off his clothes. Mr. Golden Lion, have you regressed this badly? He looked at the older man with bored appraisal. A cut without hockey couldn't pierce his defenses. Kane had hoped Golden Lion's pressure would force an awakening out of him. Instead, the other man's hockey barely even registered. Golden Lion's face twisted with rage at the insult. Damn brat! How dare you look down on me? His good mood, born from conjuring powerful beasts earlier, evaporated. Kane drifted down lightly and landed opposite him, relaxed, half smiling. From the probing strike he'd just taken, Kane judged he could handle this solo. Golden Lion seemed far weaker than in his prime, and his subordinates had no notable heavy hitters. Easy pickings. Mr. Golden Lion, jokes aside, Kane said smoothly, it's time to return what you stole from Wano, isn't it? Such sneaky behavior doesn't suit a legendary pirate, Kane added with a sigh, as if reminiscing. Golden Lion exploded with laughter that was more a roar. Do you think piracy is child's play? Something in my hands? You expect me to simply hand it back? You really think I'm that kind of man? Kane said, unflinching. Golden Lion's eyes widened, his golden mane bristled, and a heavy, violent aura rolled out of him, the remnants of a once mighty sea lord. He reached for Haoshoku Haki, trying to intimidate. Kane barely raised an eyebrow. Even your conqueror's haki weakened to this? He muttered, disappointed. That was the good news. Golden Lion still had haki. The bad news, it only had the force to bully people in the first half of the Grand Line. At this rate, in a few years, he might not be able to use any haki at all. Golden Lion watched, aghast, as Kane's expression didn't even flicker under his Haoshoku haki. 15 years had passed. Had his haki declined so much that it couldn't intimidate someone under Kaido's brat? Hey, Mr. Golden Lion, Kane continued politely. Could you return Ruskaina Island to Wano? Considering you once worked with Kaido, I won't press charges if you do. Those words cut into Golden Lion like knives. What did he mean, considering you once worked with Kaido? Was Kane treating him like someone who needed a favor to save face? Brat, this is my territory. Golden Lion shouted and leapt into the air, fury driving him. He began swinging his legs in a blur. Lion, Thousand Valley slashes. Kigarashi and Sakuraju, twin blades, sliced the air, launching dozens of golden slashes that wove into a monstrous, mountain-cleaving net aimed at Kane. A faint red glow lit Kane's eyes. He didn't dodge. Dark armament hockey rippled across his form, and he met the attack head-on. Boom, boom, boom. Explosions thundered as every inch of the place where Kane stood was shredded by flying slashes. Smoke, debris, and gouged earth rose. Deep ravines scored the ground. Indigo watched, heart in his throat. That move should have been enough to obliterate him. From the smoke, Kane emerged unharmed and composed. Not a stitch torn. Golden Lion's pupils narrowed. This defensive power rivaled Kaido's, perhaps surpassed it. He'd seen the Beast Pirates versus Red Hair broadcast. This brat had grown frighteningly strong since then. Retreat, now! Golden Lion barked at Indigo and Masira. Without hesitation, the two turned and sprinted, not staying to be a burden to their captain. When the area was cleared, Golden Lion's features hardened. He drew a deep breath, clasped his hands, and slammed them together. Lion's Might, Earth Scroll. The island itself obeyed his roar. The ground writhed and rose like a heaving sea. Massive earthen lions, 100-meter titans formed from soil and rock, erupted from the earth all around and pounced toward Kane. Kane surveyed them with a small sigh. To think you'd try something so superficial to beat me, Mr. Golden Lion. You're underestimating me. He scoffed. No matter how imposing earth constructs looked, they were still only earth. Hockey transcended such things. Dragon Pulse. Kane threw back his head and unleashed a blazing, mysterious roar. Energy coalesced in his maw and burst forth as a radiant shockwave. The blast tore through the nearest earthen lions like an enraged dragon. The creatures trembled, split, and exploded into dust and debris in deafening detonations. Golden Lion's face fell. He snapped his fingers and pointed toward a distant, frozen island. The eternal blizzard stalled. Snowflakes hung suspended midair. The snow and ice whipped together, condensed, and shaped into a colossal ice and snow lion in the sky. It dove at Kane. Flamethrower, Kane answered calmly. An orange column of searing fire blasted from his mouth like a volcanic eruption. The fiery inferno slammed into the ice beast. Steam and shattered ice filled the air. The snow lion shattered under the heat, but Golden Lion only smirked. He had more up his sleeve. With one hand, he held the pressure of the shattered ice, and with the other, he gestured toward another floating island. Seawater, the scourge of devil fruit users, began to boil on that distant isle. Plunging forth, massive lions of flowing seawater leapt free and surged like tsunamis toward Kane. Their intent was obvious: swallow him and drown him, negating any devil fruit advantage. Ice Beam, Kane cried, and a ghostly blue ray lanced from his mouth. Where it passed, the seawater lions froze almost instantly. Within seconds, those surging water beasts were turned into towering, lifelike ice sculptures, poised mid-pounce beneath a cold sun. Golden Lion's frown deepened. He launched the frozen sculptures at Kane with all his force. Kane's patience snapped. His eyes narrowed, and an immense Haoshoku haki surged out of him like a tidal wave, so tangible it felt like physical pressure. Crack! The seawater ice sculptures shattered in midair before they could reach him, breaking into a blizzard of ice fragments that fell like hail. Golden Lion's twitched. Golden Lion's jaw twitched. Conqueror's pressure, this scale, rivaled his prime. When the dust settled, Kane remarked calmly, "Being able to manipulate seawater at will, what a remarkable ability." He meant it. The float fruit's versatility could be more troublesome than the azure dragon fruit. Golden Lion, cursed with a ship's wheel bolted to his head, couldn't wield his haki as efficiently as he might, or the fight could have turned into a brutal slog. "Stop praising him," Golden Lion snarled, unable to hold himself back. Kane was no ordinary enemy. He was practically Kaido's equal. If seawater couldn't touch him, there was only one remaining option: close quarters. Under the float fruit's effect, Golden Lion's speed spiked. He blurred into a golden afterimage and closed the gap, appearing before Kane in an instant. His twin blades, the same weapons he used to move, were sheathed in dark armament haki as he swung them like lethal limbs toward Kane's vital points. Kane's playful demeanor shifted. This was the fight he wanted. His body swelled and shifted into his dragon-human form. Dragon claws laced with armament haki shot out, and guided by his future sight, he met each slash with perfect timing. Clang, clang, clang. Metal rang so hard the sounds fused into a single, unending roar. In the blink of an eye, the two of them had already clashed for several brutal rounds. The aftershocks of their battle ripped up the island's surface. Rocks and trees tore apart as if they were made of paper. Not enough! Not enough! Still not enough, Mr. Golden Lion. Kane laughed, his voice carrying clearly over the din. How long had it been? How long since anyone had dared speak to him so arrogantly, much less try to provoke him like that? Golden Lion Shiki's eyes flared with rage. Veins stood out on his forehead. The humiliation and fury instantly swamped the dull, gnawing pain inside his skull. He roared, and the speed of his kicks rose another 3 notches. That peak power, dormant for 20 years, flickered back to life. His great swordsman techniques, long rusted, flowed with a smoothness he hadn't shown in decades. Kane felt the pressure double, but his excitement only sharpened. This was the edge of his limits. He could feel awakening drawing near. Dragon Claw, Kane cried. Lion, Cross Storm, Shiki answered. The dark dragon claw slammed into the cross of the 2 famed swords with a thunderous boom. An unimaginable force surged along the blades. Shiki's pupils snapped tight. The power was terrifying. He was flung uncontrollably tens of meters, the 2 swords that had once served as his prosthetic feet gouging 2 deep trenches in the ground before he barely managed to stop himself with his float berry. In pure strength, Shiki was at a disadvantage. 2 sprays of nosebleed burst from his nostrils like crimson geysers. Blood leaked from the corners of his eyes, his ear canals, his mouth. He looked like a walking corpse from a horror film. He wrestled with the bleeding, his face set hard. He had overused his haki and finally paid the price. His head throbbed painfully. Since that damned ship's rudder had been embedded in his skull, it had not only brought hallucinations and torment, the compressed nerves had kept him from fully mobilizing his body's power. His haki had been waning. If he kept fighting like this, he might die. Give up? Shiki snapped his hands to his head, then looked up at the young figure still waiting, still hungry for more. Never. I am Golden Lion Shiki, the man who once stood against Roger and Whitebeard. Bow down to a brat? Impossible. Kane clenched his fists, feeling the power inside him on the brink of eruption, but stubbornly held back. He almost shook his head in regret. He could feel awakening a heartbeat away. How had Doflamingo done it? He'd eaten meteorites, he'd pushed himself. He was so close. Then, a red spark flashed in his eyes, and his observation haki sent a sharp, dangerous warning. Shiki floated up again, but this time he didn't charge. He gripped the corner of the ship's rudder, still buried deep in his skull, and pulled, arms tensing. Ah! With a howl that tore the air, he began to force the rudder out, a circular wheel of iron that had been threaded into his brain and flesh for years. Pain made his vision black. He nearly fainted. Still, his will was iron. The rudder came out, slow and inevitable. 10 seconds felt like centuries. The wheel, slick with dark blood and brain tissue, slipped free and thudded to the ground. Even the seasoned Kane, watching the insane scene, tightened his eyes. I have to say, Mr. Golden Lion, you're one ruthless man, or a wolf man, Kane thought. Was it worth it? To rip that thing out like that, how long could he live afterward? Shiki sealed the wound with a reckless life return, forcing the vessels closed, and showed the world a blood-stained grin. I'll use these last 3 minutes of peak power to finish you, he spat. Do you think you're Ultraman? Kane thought, alarmed, but he readied himself. The man before him was in a burst state, using his life as fuel for a brief, terrible blaze. Pfft! Shiki yanked the swords Karaboshi and Sakura Juro, the very blades that had once served as his feet, free and seized them in his hands. The aura he gave off changed instantly, arrogant, domineering, like the flying pirate prime of 20 years ago. This time I'll finally get what I wish for, he declared. Black-red haki crackled like a beast freed from chains around the 2 swords. Shiki knew the technique. Who from his era didn't? Conqueror's haki cloaked the blades. Lion's might, ring sever. He blurred forward, appearing almost at Kane's side. Muscles bulging, he lifted the swords and spun in a full circle, the blades tracing a perfect 360-degree slash. Good timing. Dragon Claw. Kane met him, never dodging. His Dragon Claw turned pitch black with its own furious black-red hockey. The two top-tier Conqueror's hockey collided with a deafening explosion. Black-red lightning erupted like mad dragons from the impact. The scarred earth screamed as layers of land were scraped away. The little island shook as if it might fall apart. The sky split open as if to make room for their battle. At the center of that storm, Kane felt a flicker of regret. You're weaker than Kaido, Shiki. But then again, it was only natural. How long had it been since Shiki had wielded hockey like this? For this to be his level now was itself a miracle. Shiki didn't have Kane's luxury. The crushing quality of the other man's Conqueror's hockey pushed through Shiki's swords and made his heart tremble. This kid's hockey, superior to his own? Still, he would never surrender. Lion, Thousand Cut Valley. Shiki ground out, his arms a blur. Countless golden slashes, sharp as storms, rained down toward Kane. Useless. Airblade. Kane waved his claws. Condensed blades of air shredded the incoming golden slashes mid-flight. During the clash, Kane couldn't help but remark with a cold amusement, "More than a minute has passed, Mr. Golden Lion." Shiki's breathing came harder. The strain showed. "Shut up. The remaining time is enough to finish you," he snapped, though there was a faint tremor of helplessness in his voice. He halted the assault, hovering, chest heaving. If he kept bleeding life away like this, he'd be wasting himself without ever killing this brat. Even if the boy didn't dodge, victory would be uncertain. "No, I am old, but as long as this heart beats, as long as this body can fight, the battle isn't over. A true lion dies in glory, not in a quiet surrender." He hated Roger for giving in. Surrender to the Marines? Impossible. Force gathered again, an aura magnified. He became a golden streak, charging with even more desperate fury. His dual swords tore the air, weaving a denser, more frenzied net of slashes than before. Kane stood and met them, but a crease appeared between his brows. "Mr. Golden Lion, I told you, this is futile," Kane said. Right then, Kane's observation hockey flared with a vision he had never felt before. A future snapshot slammed into him and made him hesitate. What was that? Shiki's eyes went feral with determination. He crossed his swords before his chest in a final stance. Lion, final cross storm. He abandoned defense, pouring all his remaining life, hockey, and willpower into Karaboshi and Sakurajuro. He became a burning meteor, striking Kane faster than any previous move. Kane, caught off guard, was blasted away by the concentrated fury of the legendary pirate's last efforts. But Shiki wasn't done. He was gasping, his chest pounding, a fierce light in his eyes. He discarded the two swords he loved and flailed his arms, fully activating his float berry. Two mountain-sized floating islands tore through the air, one ahead and one behind, closing in on the path where Kane was recoiling. The islands slammed together with a cataclysmic roar, sandwiching Kane in the center. The collision echoed across the sea. Shiki pressed his palms, chanting, "Snake coil." The impossible happened. The two islands, like lumps of clay, began to squeeze, twist, and merge. Rocks, soil, trees, everything was kneaded and fused by a monstrous force. In breaths, the islands had become a single, enormous rock sphere suspended in the air. But Shiki pushed further. The sphere groaned and began to compress inward, steadily collapsing toward a crushing core. He intended to crush Kane to death. Everyone besides the fighters froze. By the railing of the Rayquaza, people huddled pale and wide-eyed. Wasn't Kane on top moments ago? How had the tide turned so suddenly? "Damn, old lion!" Yamato ground her silver teeth. She rolled up her sleeve, gripped her spiked club, and was about to leap off the ship to save Kane. Kazuki Hiyori and the others moved after her. Even Bonnie waddled forward, ready to rush to Brother Kane. "Wait, Miss Yamato." Kuma's deep voice stopped her. His broad palm, solid as an iron gate, held her and everyone else back. He spread his other hand and showed them something. The paper that represented Kane's life status, the little indicator, was perfectly intact, not even a crease. Kane was alive. "Look," Violet, watching the rock sphere, called out, then hesitated. "I see Kane, but he looks different." "Different?" Kazuki Hiyori clutched Violet's arm. "What do you mean? Is he hurt?" "Not hurt," Violet said, almost dazed, searching for words. "He's more like a god." "A god?" The word sent a shock through the group. Bonnie pointed up. The sky that had been hazy moments before had cleared to flawless blue, as if the heavens themselves had become a witness. Shiki, meanwhile, was straining to hold the crushing compression, his face drained of color. He spat blood. The rock ball, which had been iron-bound under his control, pushed back from inside with a resistance he couldn't explain. Cracks spidered across the sphere's surface, and from them flowed a golden light, more than light, something divine. Everyone stared, breath held. The light didn't blind them, it made them feel they were watching something holy. Then, boom, the sphere ruptured. From the shattered rock erupted a divine dragon 100 meters long, wreathed in golden radiance. Chapter 128, The Curtain Falls on Golden Lion. Shiki Kane's body was changing in a way that shook the heavens. He grew nearly a third larger, and the strange circular markings that had once mottled his skin had been replaced by glowing golden gems. A bright delta mark shone on his forehead. His horns had altered too. The upper pair elongated into sharp points, while the lower pair stretched forward to arch protectively in front of his mouth. Most striking of all were 4 long, flexible tendrils of pure golden light that streamed from the 4 horns like ribbons. They swayed behind him as if they were alive, giving him a sacred, otherworldly presence. Unlike the usual flame cloud ribbons that came with mythical Zoan awakenings, these were his own unique ribbons. Is this an awakening? Kane felt a surge of new power, and something clicked into place. When body and mind were ready to match an ability, the devil fruit could awaken. That had been the meaning behind the foreseen future. He remembered the readout from his observation hockey. He could have broken through earlier, but the crushing external pressure from Golden Lion Shiki's desperate strike was the key that would pry open the door to awakening. Kane had let it happen on purpose, taking the hit and using Shiki's final attack to trigger his breakthrough. A controlled, intoxicating power eased through him, and he let out a roar that rolled across the clouds. He had reached this point. His choice had been right. On the deck of the Rayquaza, everyone stared skyward as the golden figure descended like a god. Some were awestruck. "Good, I'm going to awaken too," Yamato cried, eyes shining with stars. Kane had no time to savor his companions' cheers. The islands maintained by the float fruit were shaking wildly, losing levitation, about to plummet into the sea. If Shiki died mid-collapse, Ruzukaina would go down with him. Kozuki Hiyori couldn't move a large island yet. Kane couldn't afford delay. "Don't die yet, Shiki. At least put the islands down before you go," he shouted as he dove toward the fallen golden captain. He scooped up the barely breathing Shiki and gave him 2 sharp slaps. The hits were just enough to rouse him. The old captain's eyes rolled and fluttered open, but he couldn't form words. With trembling fingers, he smeared blood on the deck and scrawled 2 crude circles, each dotted with random marks. 2 heads? His meaning was indecipherable. "Write in Japanese, I can't read that!" Kane snapped, then slapped him twice more when Shiki began to fade again. Shiki flared with helpless fury. How dare Kane disturb him in death? But Kane had no time for his protests. Hoisting Shiki onto his shoulder, he flew back toward the Rayquaza, using one of Ash's 3 divine techniques to speed them. On a nearby ship-shaped island, the flying pirates erupted into chaos when they saw the scene on a Den Mushi. "Captain's been captured," they cried. "What do we do? What do we do?" Indigo pushed through the panic. He clomped forward on his ridiculous shoes, began throwing about elaborate hand signs and wild gestures, and then stopped, looking to the others with a solemn, earnest face. For a moment, no one could make sense of him. Finally, Indigo shouted, "We have to rescue Captain Shiki." The pirates stared in stunned silence. "He can talk," and then erupted in complaint. But despite the noise, they rallied. Swords were grabbed, mounts saddled. They swore to die with the beast's pirates rather than leave their captain to Kane. Back on the Rayquaza, Kane barked, "Quick, healing tears." Thanks to Mancheri's diligent training, she had extended the shelf life of her healing tears. Though weaker than when fresh, a carefully preserved vial was more than enough to stabilize a dying man. Robin produced a tiny glass tube and dropped a single preserved tear into Shiki's mouth. It worked like a miracle. Shiki's shallow breathing steadied. The islands that had been wobbling in the sky stilled and resumed their regulated suspension as his life signs stabilized. Shiki blinked, dazed. "How can I still see you, even in heaven? Did I die for nothing?" he muttered. Kane grinned. Heaven? Not likely. Hell's more your style. Humph. Even if it's hell. Shiki answered stubbornly. I'll claw my way to heaven. Then realization dawned that he wasn't dead. You saved me? He asked slowly, suspicion in his voice. What do you want, brat? Kane pointed at the islands. Put Rusakaina down in the sea. That's all I ask. Shiki snorted. What if I refuse? Then I'll kill every one of your loyal men, Kane said simply. I won't leave any of them alive to become slaves. Kane knew Shiki well enough to be confident the threat would work. Shiki had always protected his crew, especially the men he'd gathered in his later years. As if on cue, a cry from the sky broke through. Release Captain Shiki! A squad of flying pirates descended on flying beasts, Indigo leading them. He hefted a rocket launcher-like device and fired a warhead over the Rayquaza. The device detonated in midair and spewed a thick emerald cloud of daft green poisonous gas, spreading over much of the deck. Indigo, gas-masked, cackled triumphant. The scene he expected, panic and collapse, didn't happen. Reiju stepped forward coolly, parted her lips, and inhaled the poison as if drawing breath. Her skin turned briefly green, then flushed healthy and rosier than before. The gas did nothing. She exhaled with obvious satisfaction. Long time no taste, she said. The deck erupted in admiration. Kane only shook his head with amusement. People who sat and stared at the sky too long developed delusions of invincibility. Indigo's fancy gadget had failed to faze them. With the beasts unable to keep charging, Ace, Zoro, and Sanji were more than enough to rout the attackers. The flying pirates were soon subdued, messy and kneeling on the deck. Kane indicated the tied prisoners and said calmly, Their lives now depend entirely on your next thought, Mr. Shiki. Captain Shiki, don't listen to him. We won't betray you, the bound men cried. None begged mercy. Many preferred to die rather than see their captain bullied. Watching such loyalty squeeze Shiki's features, Kane saw his pride and stubbornness falter. Eventually, he sighed. Fine, I'll do as you say. Then, surprisingly, Shiki offered a bargain that even Kane found tempting. There's an island plant I've been studying, IQ, he said. He told a brief story of his escape from prison and the years afterward. I'll hand over all my IQ research and my 2 swords, Kotetsu and Sakuraju, if you let my men live and take them away. The IQ plant wasn't useless. Its simplest application, driving animals into a frenzy, was crude, but it had mutation potential similar to the blood orchid in Anaconda and significant research value. And the 2 swords were great-grade blades. Kane nodded. The deal was acceptable. Kane couldn't resist one last barb. But I never understood why you'd cultivate ferocious beasts to destroy East Blue. You can fly. If you wanted revenge, just lift an island and hurl it at the red line. Throw and run. Who would catch you? Shiki stared at him as if he'd been in the late stage of senility. How had he not thought of that? A wash of regret and absurdity flooded him at the thought of a 15-year detour in his plans. He wanted to implement Kane's idea, but life was a candle in the wind. His time was up. What a pity, he murmured. The blurred corner of Shiki's vision caught a familiar young face on deck. It stirred something. Hey, Straw Hat Kid, what's your name? He asked. Ace looked puzzled, glanced at Kane, then answered plainly, Portgas D. Ace. Age? Shiki asked. 15, Ace replied. Shiki clicked his tongue and then turned to Kane. Kane, kid, this brat is Roger's son, isn't he? He may have been mistaken about names, but after a lifetime beside Roger, his instincts told him this boy had the father's blood. Kane nodded confirmation. Humph, so that's the sort of thing. That arrogant, freedom-loving Roger, he must have had a day when family bound him. Shiki said with a sad chuckle. Whether he mocked Roger or himself, it was hard to tell. With that last concern eased, Shiki poured what was left of his will into controlling the islands. Slowly, painfully, he guided them downward. Minutes later, dull, massive thuds echoed across the sea as the floating islands dropped back into the water. When the last sound faded on the breeze, Kane glanced back. Golden Lion, Shiki had closed his eyes, head bowed, utterly still. A legendary captain who had once contended with Gold D. Roger and Whitebeard, Golden Lion Shiki of the Flying Pirates ended here, his last breath given to a sea he had ruled and regretted. Chapter 129, Aftermath. Retracing the Grand Line. Golden Lion was dead and the Flying Pirates were officially disbanded. Kane kept his word and released all captured members. Most chose to return to the sea and seek new paths, but a few, broken in spirit, stayed on the island where their captain had fallen to spend their remaining days. Indigo and Scarlet were among them. These are the results of my research over the years. Before he died, Golden Lion had given Indigo instructions. Indigo handed over stacks of data, samples of strange IQ potions, and all the laboratory notes to Kane. His voice was calm, but there was an empty sort of relief in it. With his captain gone, he had lost the heart for researching IQ plants. Kane nodded and signaled his crew to carefully load the treasure. Everything was valuable war spoils. At the same time, Kane picked up his Den Mushi to make a call. He needed to reach Kaido. Without a top-heavy lifter, transporting an entire island back to Wano was impossible. Kane was about to benefit from Golden Lion's downfall, but the death itself had already sent shockwaves through the world. No matter how much the man had declined physically, his name was legend and a piece of history. Marineford Headquarters, the Fleet Admiral's office. The Golden Lion is dead, and we only heard it from the World Economy newspaper? Sengoku slammed the paper on his desk and scolded the Vice Admiral in charge of intelligence, who stood hunched in apology. Even the goat chewing on the corner of the desk paused. Vice Admiral Tsuru set down her teacup, unruffled. You can't blame him entirely. You and I both know Shiki's float fruit ability. Tracking him through the sky is like finding a needle in a haystack. Besides, we don't have an organized air force. The intelligence officer bowed lower in relief. Sigh. Go back. Sengoku heaved a long, tired sigh. He understood the limitations, but it stung that Morgans had first-hand news the official channels missed. Tsuru's gaze drifted to a photo in the paper, Calamity Kane, and she smiled. So about this Calamity Kane, do we take special action? He didn't seem to exert himself much against Golden Lion. Raise his bounty by 400 million berries, Sengoku said after a moment's thought. But unless he openly attacks world government nations or commits something extreme, we won't tie up one, let alone 2 admirals, to hunt a single errant pirate. We simply don't have enough top fighters to spare. Tsuru inclined her head, moving to lighter topics. By the way, Zephyr's still sharp as ever. That youngster Luffy has started actively taking on pirates. Garp was overjoyed. So overjoyed he celebrated by hoarding rice crackers in the office for 3 days. Sengoku grumbled, rolling his eyes. The pair of old fools made him both annoyed and amused. Tsuru added, Zephyr took Luffy and a few students to East Blue and dismantled a crew called Arlong, freeing an oppressed village. Sengoku relaxed as the report came to mind. As the grandson of a marine hero, Luffy's every move after joining the Marines was watched closely. If not for Garp and a fundamentally decent nature, the stubborn kid might have been expelled. Fortunately, Garp had entrusted Luffy to Zephyr's tutelage, and it seemed to be paying off. Luffy's combat talent was startling for a 12-year-old with a 20 million berry bounty. A sea area in the New World. The Moby Dick. Pops, look at today's news. Marco handed the World Economy paper to Whitebeard, who was propped up with an IV drip. Whitebeard sat up slightly and peered at the headline, his booming laughter fading. Oh, Shiki has fallen, huh? A remnant of an era gone. He stared across the vast sea with a loneliness only he could hide. Tato Land, Cake Island. Mama, mama, Charlotte Linlin grumbled around a mouthful of cake. That old lion really went downhill, taken down by some kid who just showed up. Red Force. The Golden Lion is dead too? Shanks set down his paper and took a slow drink of sake. The memory of the Ed War burned vivid. In a blink, a man who had once vied with Roger was no more. Beckman calmly wiped his gun, but a flash of interest crossed his eyes. Back at the island Golden Lion had returned to, Kane and his group rested. Brother Kane, you're on the front page. Sanji ran up waving a fresh paper. But that's odd, he pointed. They don't show your new form. I told Morgans not to, Kane said. An ability awakening is a trump card. Its surprise was an advantage. As they talked, Kane's Den Mushi buzzed constantly, congratulatory callers ringing in. Fufu, congratulations, Kane. The underworld is buzzing about Calamity. When will you visit Joy Street to tell us about your fight? Defeating Golden Lion had sharpened Kane's reputation overnight. 3 days later, on a small, unnamed island at a cliff's edge, the sun sank half below the horizon and painted the sea a warm orange. Seabird cries and a gentle breeze soothed the scene. A simple dirt grave had been set up with a stone tablet summarizing Golden Lion's life. His relic, Oga, hung above it. Kaido sat cross-legged before the grave, hulking and incongruously sorrowful. "Shiki, you bastard, why'd you go and die like that?" He bawled and smashed a gourd of strong liquor between his hands, tears mixing with snot as he cursed the dead for being weak. Kane and the others watched quietly from a distance. "Is that real?" Ace whispered, staring. "That's Kaido of the Four Emperors." Kane answered Ace's unspoken question. They used to be on the same ship. Even under rocks, comradeship had existed. It just showed itself as a hard, short-lived sorrow now that one of them was gone. After a while, Kaido drained his gourd, wiped his face with a huge hand, and without looking back, rose to stagger away. "Wororo, kid, I heard your devil fruit awakened?" he slurred, his eyes suddenly sharp with battle lust. His huge frame leaned forward, radiating oppressive strength. "Want to fight with the Beast's pirates on the line?" The Beast's pirates lived by might makes right. As captain, Kaido accepted challenges to test strength. Kane did not shirk. He met Kaido's gaze calmly. "Wait until I return from my journey." He had only just reached the Grand Line and didn't want to rush back to the New World. The Marines and world government would be watching him now. He wanted to use this free time to see the world properly. Kaido laughed and clapped a drunken hand on Kane's shoulder. A journey. Interesting. I'll be waiting." Then Kaido stumbled to the shore, shifted into his azure dragon form, and took to the sky. He hovered over Ruskaina Island and began to manipulate flame clouds, hauling the island up from the sea. Kane had already transferred the IQ plants, research data, and other spoils onto Ruskaina. Kaido could pack it all and carry it to Wano. But Kaido was thoroughly drunk. His massive dragon body swayed midair, making Ruskaina shudder and wobble as if it might plummet at any moment. "Don't make me wait too long." "Hic," he belched, spraying a few embers and a whiff of alcohol, then started flying. "Hey, wait." Kane cupped his hands and shouted. "You're going the wrong way. Wano's to the west." "Huh, is it?" Kaido seemed dazed. The dragon flicked its tail and the island awkwardly pivoted. "Wrong. South." Kane pressed a hand to his forehead and shouted corrections again and again. After several heart-stopping directional adjustments, the drunk dragon finally found west, probably, and lumbered into the horizon, dragging the island like a drunken freight wagon. "Like that, will he really bring the island back safely?" Ace gaped. "We've got no choice but to trust him," Kane said with a helpless shrug. The pirate world had no laws against drunk flying, and no one was going to lecture Kaido anyway. Even if he smashed something, he'd call it a speed bump. Once Kaido's spectacular aerial transport vanished, Kane clapped to get everyone's attention, a long-awaited smile spreading over his face. "All right, Rayquaza, prepare to set sail again." "First stop, Twin Capes," Kane declared. He meant to retrace the entire Grand Line. Having finally come to this world, how could he claim to have truly experienced it if he didn't walk the route his predecessors took? There were too many things Kane wanted to see with his own eyes and touch with his own hands. He wanted to know if Crocus had rescued Brook lost in the Florian Triangle. He wanted to read the letter Queen Lily of Alabasta left behind. He wanted the friendship of the two giant pirates on Little Garden. He wanted to take on Wapol of Drum Kingdom and Eneru of Sky Island. He wanted the Pluton blueprints from Water 7. He wanted it all. Little Bonnie was the first to raise her hand, delight written all over her face. Travel was pure joy. One by one, the others smiled and echoed her eagerness, the call to see the world already in their blood. "Then let's go." Kane laughed and waved the order. Fortunately, their current position wasn't far from Twin Capes, so they didn't have to backtrack much. Chapter 130, Meeting Brook, Wano Country's hero Mariah. The lighthouse still stood at the mouth of Reverse Mountain, its pure white tower bright in the sun. A gentle sea breeze pushed the waves, which lapped the shoreline in a soothing, steady rhythm. In that peaceful, lazy scene, a pleasant song drifted quietly over the water. Yo-ho-ho, yo-ho-ho-ho, yo-ho-ho, yo-ho-ho. Bink Sake, delivered to you. Like the sea breeze, carefree and easy, riding the waves. A skeleton in a top hat and an exaggerated pompadour stood by the sea, playing a violin with surprising elegance and concentration. He sang loudly. Oddly, even without flesh or organs, he still managed to produce his unique laugh and an infectious singing voice. In the shallows, The enormous whale Laboon floated quietly, clearly lost in the familiar tune, occasionally blasting a spectacular spout of water from its blowhole in time with the music. Rainbows shimmered in the spray. Beside the skeleton, Crocus reclined on a lounge chair in a Hawaiian shirt, tapping his toes to the rhythm and looking perfectly content. A large ship cut slowly through wind and wave toward the melody. The cheerful song drew attention instantly. It's a skeleton singing, and playing the violin, how cool! Yamato clung to the rail, eyes shining. Bonnie, crunching a bag of potato chips, hurried over to the rail. So cool. Is that Bink Sake? Violet listened for a moment, and then said with certainty. The song was famous among pirates for its spirited lyrics and tune. Violet, who loved music and dance, recognized it immediately. Sanji paused, then returned to the cabin and came back with 2 trays of colorful, self-mixed cocktails, one non-alcoholic for Bonnie. Everyone, you can't enjoy this song without a drink, Sanji declared, handing them out with characteristic flourish. Nice! Kane took a glass and gave Sanji a thumbs up. The cook twisted into an exaggerated bow, pleased as punch. Big brother Kane praises me. As they laughed and chatted, their ship successfully docked. Brook didn't notice their arrival. He was lost in his music. Only after the final note did he stop and reluctantly finish his performance. Never ending, never aiming, just laughing talk. Yo-ho-ho, yo-ho-ho, yo-ho, yo-ho-ho. The song and violin faded into the sea breeze. Clap, clap, clap. Kane and his group applauded generously. Thank you all very much for your appreciation. Brook lowered his violin with a gentlemanly flourish and doffed his hat in a formal bow. Is it really a skeleton with its own thoughts and feelings? Kuma's typically calm voice held a rare note of surprise. He'd expected something more mechanical. It is indeed. I have my own thoughts, even if I no longer have a brain. Yo-ho-ho. Brook flashed his toothy grin and let out his signature laugh. Kane, Yamato, Kozuki Hiyori, Ace. Crocus rose from his lounge with a warm smile. Long time no see. The previous tensions between Kane's group and Shanks hadn't changed Crocus's fondness for old acquaintances. Mr. Crocus, long time no see, everyone returned the greeting warmly. Old man, you're looking well, Kane said, then glanced at the skeleton musician. If I'm not mistaken, this is Mr. Perwell Brook, the friend Laboon's been waiting for decades, right? It is I. And you are? Brook's voice carried a hint of surprise and confusion. Crocus had told him that a man named Kane had provided crucial information. Without Kane's help, Crocus and Laboon might never have found Brook in the Grand Line. Crocus smiled and made introductions. That's right, it was him. Thank you, Lord Kane. I will never forget your kindness. Brook stepped forward solemnly and offered his bony hand. Even as a skeleton, his expressions registered clearly. Don't mention it. I couldn't bear to see Laboon keep ramming the red line. Kane took the hand. Shaking the hand of a skeleton is not an everyday thing, and a subtle smile played on his lips. If he hadn't been traveling, he might never have seen such a scene. Then, without warning, Brook suddenly flashed forward toward Yamato, Kozuki Hiyori, Robin, and the other women. His tone turned ridiculously earnest. Beautiful ladies, may I be permitted to admire your panties? Huh! Yamato, Hiyori, Robin, and the others gaped. With a sharp crack, a fresh red bump appeared on Brook's skull. Behave yourself, Crocus scolded, clenching his fist, an action that betrayed he was used to Brook's antics. My bones are broken. Brook collapsed theatrically, groaning weakly, the classic skeleton with a conch on the head bit. Kane watched the familiar scene with amusement. If he hadn't left home to see the world, he would never have witnessed such things. His skull's cracked, Bonnie pointed out. It's nothing, Brook said, dusting himself off as if it were nothing and touching the visible crack. A glass of milk will fix it right up, yo-ho-ho-ho. Milk in this world was almost miraculous. Bones repaired, teeth restored. No wonder some pirates' teeth changed so often. Kane couldn't help being curious. Brook, why are you so fixated on, looking at women's underwear? Brook's demeanor was that of a true gentleman. Elegant speech, refined manners, graceful fighting style, yet he had this persistent fixation. Some old-timers whispered that he might be looking for someone named Junko, who was said to have worn only a pair of panties as clothing. At Kane's question, Brook froze, as if trying to dredge up a lost memory. Time, so much time has passed. I've forgotten. Perhaps it's just instinct, Brook admitted after a long moment. his hollow eye sockets gazing toward the sea. "Does the name Junko mean anything to you?" Kane asked softly. At those two syllables, Brooke staggered as if struck by lightning. For a second, a blurry silhouette of a little girl with a sun-like smile flashed through his sealed memories. "Yo-ho-ho-ho, becoming a pirate has always been my dream," he seemed to remember saying to that child. But any attempt to grasp more, her face, her story, made the image dissolve. Brooke shook his head. "I can't remember." "Actually, because Oda didn't draw it. Hehe." Kane shrugged, unbothered. "Old man, tell us how you got Brooke's shadow back." Crocus leaned back in his lounge chair, took a slow sip, and began the tale of his trip to the Devil's Triangle. As Kane had guessed, an old friend came out of seclusion to help. The legendary Rayleigh, still sharp despite retirement, had set out with Crocus. Tracking down Mariah's thriller bark inside the Devil's Triangle was one thing. Dealing with Gecko Mariah himself had been another. Crocus's account made it sound almost effortless. Rayleigh found the thriller bark, faced the bloated idol Mariah, and without much trouble, defeated him. Mariah had grown decadent. He'd come to rely on stolen shadows and outside help, abandoning training and letting his own strength wane. "Mariah has regressed far too much," Crocus shook his head. Kane frowned. Who would have thought that the Mariah who'd once fought Kaido could, in 16 years, become an overweight, shadow-obsessed has-been? In the pirate world, losing the will to fight often meant losing haki, the power of the spirit, and with it, one's edge. Crocodile had become another example. After a crushing defeat, he invested his ambitions in finding Pluton rather than training, and his fighting spirit faded. The opposite was Luffy, whose first thought at every powerful opponent is that he isn't strong enough and must get stronger. When Crocus mentioned seeing a samurai named Ryuma on Thriller Bark, Kozuki Hiyori stiffened. The name tugged at something buried in her. "Ryuma the dragon-slaying samurai?" she blurted. "He called himself that," Crocus confirmed. Hiyori's eyes filled with sudden, frantic pleading. She took Kane's hand without thinking. "Lord Kane, please, take me to Thriller Bark." To the people of Wano, Ryuma was a legendary hero, a symbol revered for generations. His sword Shusui was a national treasure. Its theft would cast the whole country into mourning. 16 years ago, Shusui had gone missing from its shrine, and the people of Wano had searched fruitlessly for years. Now, to hear a clue at Reverse Mountain, and to learn that Ryuma's corpse had been raised as a zombie on Thriller Bark, suggested that the theft had taken more than just a sword. Unforgivable. They stole Shusui and even disturbed Lord Ryuma's resting place. Hiyori, usually gentle, was trembling with fury at Mariah's crimes. And then, like a cracked seal, another memory from 16 years ago popped open in her mind. I remember. Her face reddened. She recalled where she'd heard Mariah's name in Wano. People had thought someone there was resisting Kaido's rule. They'd erected a monument under the name Kozuki Moriya, believing it a remnant spark of the Kozuki line. Kane's expression went strange. The corner of his mouth twitched. The others exchanged embarrassed looks. Mariah, a grave robber and sword thief, being hailed a hero in Wano was almost comical. If Mariah knew, he'd likely have laughed himself hoarse. "No, they didn't know," Hiyori murmured, cheeks flaming. "They only saw someone opposing Kaido, someone who seemed to die for it. They thought it was the Kozuki spirit living on." Brooke, who had been listening quietly, suddenly raised a hand. About that, Shusui is in my possession." "What?" Hiyori's eyes went wide. The news hit her like a physical blow. She nearly doubled over from shock. Chapter 131, The Ownership of Shusui. That's how it is. Before the samurai Ryuma fell into his eternal sleep, he didn't want his beloved sword Shusui to lie silent with him on that ghost ship. He entrusted it to me and asked me to find a worthy new owner. Brooke briefly told them the fate that bound him to Ryuma. "I've waited a long time on Reverse Mountain. Countless swordsmen have passed on their way to the Grand Line, but I never found anyone Shusui would accept." His tone softened. Maybe Shusui was waiting for you." He went back into the lighthouse and soon returned with a weathered samurai sword in an ancient scabbard. The sight of it made Kozuki Hiyori spring to her feet. As a princess of Wano, she recognized that scabbard immediately. "Shusui," she bowed deeply to Brooke. "Mr. Brooke, forgive my presumption, but I beg you, return Shusui to me. I will re-enshrine it in a shrine in Wano Country." Brook looked troubled and scratched his head. You have saved me, and you are Ryuma's countryman. Under normal circumstances, I would return it. But Ryuma's dying wish was that his sword should be placed in the hands of someone who could fight with it, not locked away in a shrine as an ornament. He stroked the scabbard as if remembering. For a swordsman, the greatest wish is for his sword to continue to shine in a worthy hand. If it becomes a thing to be worshipped behind glass, it becomes useless to a warrior. Hiyori fell silent, fingers going automatically to Enma and Butsumitama at her waist. Brook was right. A sword is a weapon, a partner to its wielder. To keep it from fulfilling its purpose would be to deny its spirit. She let go of the idea of taking Shusui back to Wano. She had no thought of keeping it herself. Her two-sword style and her own blades suited her. Kane, who had been watching quietly, turned and looked at the three youngsters who had gathered to listen. Zoro's gaze had not left Shusui since it appeared. His green eyes were bright with the hungry thrill of a swordsman seeing a masterpiece. Zoro, Kane said, drawing him back. The green-haired youth blinked. Kane smiled. Want to try it? You still need 2 good swords. Shusui is already a black blade. Use it for a while. Kane had originally intended to entrust the 2 fine blades left by Golden Lion to Zoro, but the kid had shrugged them off, saying he felt nothing. 2 famous swords sat unused in Kane's vault, awaiting their true owner. Kane wasn't offended. He understood that famous swords had spirits and had to match their wielder. Zoro, though, had fallen for Shusui at first sight. Couldn't ask for more, Zoro said, hand already inching to the hilt at his waist, his fighting spirit flaring. Mr. Brook, what do you think? I have no objections, Brook said readily. He stayed on Reverse Mountain, partly because he had nowhere else to go, partly to keep his promise to Ryuma. If this young man wanted to try Shusui, Brook would not refuse. Are we going to fight? Zoro asked. Something nudged Kane's wing. Yamato's small head popped out from his shoulder, excited. I want to see rivers of blood. She squealed. Bonnie, clinging to Kane's other shoulder, puffed her cheeks and waved her little fists. Bonnie, Kuma's patient voice cut in. A lady shouldn't speak of such things. He had tried to teach Bonnie manners after curing her illness, though she wandered farther from that path each day. It's fine, Kuma, Kane soothed, stroking Bonnie's hair. A lady still needs to be able to protect herself. Bonnie beamed and rubbed against Kane's hand. Kuma sighed. Kane was a serious obstacle to his lessons, but even he agreed about strength being necessary for safety. On the open ground, Brook and Zoro faced each other. A tense, murderous aura filled the air. The crew formed a ring around them. Even the great whale Laboon surfaced nearby, eyes full of concern. Kane glanced at Yamato. How's your apprentice with Haki? It did it, Yamato crowed. Proud, Laboon had managed to activate Haki, even if it couldn't yet cloak its body. Kane praised her, and Yamato beamed and pressed against him, thrilled. Everyone settled into high anticipation. Zoro crouched into his 3-sword-style stance and charged like a leopard. Brook drew his cane sword with a calm flourish and met him blade to blade. Clang! The ground cracked around their feet from the force. They separated as soon as they touched, both satisfied to have found a worthy opponent. Brook raised his cane sword, face serious. Next time, I won't hold back. About time! Zoro grinned, hungry. I'll bide, frosty sword slash. Brook pointed his tip at Zoro, then vanished like a ghost. Alarm flared in Zoro's chest. He twisted instinctively, training saving him. A streak of cold sword chi grazed his earlobe, snipping several strands of green hair. He rolled aside, cold sweat on his brow. Without the Haki he'd been training, he wouldn't have reacted in time. Sanji leaned into Kane, whispering, Is that Mosshead all right? Mr. Brook is really strong. Kane smiled confidently. Trust Zoro. His hard work will pay off. His future sight would step in if things went truly wrong. Brook retreated a step and relaxed his stance slightly, giving Zoro time to breathe. Do you want to continue, young man? Next time, luck may not be on your side. Less talk, Zoro snapped. 3-sword style, Onigiri. He surged forward. Brook flashed too, their figures intersected like lightning. For a heartbeat, everything froze. Zoro held his finishing posture. Brook had his back to him, calm as he sheathed his cane sword. Humming, arrow tail slash! A spray of blood burst from Zoro's chest. Zoro! Sanji and Ace cried at once. Their bickering forgotten, their concern for their comrade was immediate. Kane held them back, gaze steady on the center of the field. "Would you want someone interrupting your duel if it were you?" he asked. They balked and fell silent. Zoro gritted his teeth and forced himself upright, clenching his muscles to staunch the bleeding. He faced Brook again in three-sword style. His fighting spirit burned brighter than before. "Remarkable willpower," Brook said sincerely. Perhaps this was the wielder Shusui had been waiting for. But praise alone wouldn't decide it. To learn the soul of a swordsman, Brook needed an all-out fight. Prelude, au fur, whoosh! Brook darted forward, Kane's sword flashing in a blur, but he didn't aim for Zoro's body. Like a surgeon, he probed at the blades in Zoro's hands. Parry, thrust, tap at the same surfaces, creating a rapid, metallic chorus. "Is that meant to destroy the weapon?" Zoro demanded, pupils narrowing. Brook's probing speed was greater. Zoro couldn't match it. His only hope was to hold still and counter a single opening. He abandoned offense and focused entirely on defense. The two swords became a shield, clashing methodically with Brook's strikes. But Brook's speed made Zoro fumble. His defenses were strained to the breaking point. "This is a bad idea," Zoro thought. Brook actually spoke between rapid attacks, a hint of warning in his voice. "Prolonged defense leads to loss. My sword speed surpasses yours." "Stop talking. Show me what you have." Zoro snarled back, forcing his mind to predict Brook's next strike. Repeated blows began to wear at his grip. Blood stained the sword hilts. His arms trembled. Kane, watching, let a small, relieved smile spread. "That's it. Under pressure. Let your hockey bloom." As if on cue, Zoro's eyes sharpened. The blades that had started to lag suddenly snapped into sync with Brook's tempo. It wasn't that he matched the speed. Brook began to collide with Zoro's defense instead of sweeping through it. Brook's face showed a flicker of surprise. Had Zoro awakened observation hockey mid-battle? That was impressive, but even that couldn't close the gap entirely. With a thought, Brook withdrew and floated backward like a falling leaf. Observation hockey isn't omnipotent. When absolute speed exceeds the limits of your nervous reactions, seeing doesn't mean your body can move in time. He bowed slightly, Kane's sword held horizontally, an old swordsman's courtesy. "Please be careful, Sir Zoro." Before Zoro could answer, Brook blurred again. "Party music, consecutive slashes." Whoosh! A storm of thrusts and cuts flashed at Zoro. Exhausted, he couldn't react fast enough. Bloody petals opened across his body. Zoro had not come to merely defend. He had been baiting Brook. "Your speed is fast, but if I wait for you to come to me," he laughed, wild and bright. A faint, invisible haze radiated from him and wrapped around his three blades. The next instant, their forms crossed. Three-sword style, burning onigiri. Crack, bone split. A deep gap opened in Brook's lower spine, and blue flames roared from the wound. "Ah! So hot! So hot!" Brook screamed even without nerves, the heat driving him to a comic panic. Laboon, watching from a distance, plunged its head down and shot a geyser of seawater at Brook. The spray drenched him and extinguished the flames. "Ah, I'm saved, though I've already died once. Yo-ho!" Brook collapsed out of his battle skin and into his playful self again. Zoro had poured everything into that final cut. He fell to the ground, breathless, the Wado Ichimonji still clenched in his mouth. The two swords in his hands had borne the strain no longer. They shattered into pieces. Chapter 132, Dory and Brogy. Zoro opened his eyes slowly, consciousness returning in fragments. He was tightly wrapped in bandages, lying on a strange bed. His swords, Shusui and Wado Ichimonji, lay quietly by his pillow. The room was lit by a dim yellow glow. Outside the window it was pitch black. The sun had set. From beyond the window came faint laughter, music, and the smell of cooking that pricked at Zoro's curiosity. He forced himself to sit up, wobbled to his feet, and stepped out. The clearing before the lighthouse had become a grand banquet. Barrels of sake were piled to one side, a bonfire crackled beneath a giant roasted fish, and Laboon lowed happily in the nearby strait. Kane sat at the center of it all, surrounded by Violet, Kozuki Hiyori, Yamato, Robin, and Reiju. Violet smiled as she fed Kane a slice of fruit. Hiyori, elegant as ever, poured him sake. Yamato was the liveliest, waving a huge chunk of meat and shouting boisterously, which made Kane smile with indulgent amusement. Robin had set aside her books and sat a little closer than usual, watching gently and chatting with Reiju now and then. Bonnie sat near the fire, eyes fixed on the fish, chewing on roasted meat and occasionally offering a muffled recommendation to Kuma beside her. Kuma answered softly, and with a handkerchief, tidied the little mess Bonnie made. Brook played his violin, giving the scene a jaunty soundtrack, and Crocus listened with his cup raised in applause at the music's bright moments. Ace and Sanji sat arm in arm by the Psyche barrels, several empty cups in front of them. Sanji's gaze was hazy, but he still found the strength to scold Ace for grabbing food before it was finished, while Ace laughed and shoved more meat into his mouth in reply. Someone at the doorway spotted Zoro. "Marimo, finally decided to wake up?" Sanji called first. His teasing tone edged with relief. "Zoro, you okay?" Ace swallowed and waved, smiling brightly. All eyes turned to him. Brook set his violin aside and bowed with a flourish. "Mr. Zoro, marvelous, you've woken. I entrust Shusui to you." Kane stood, picked up a cup and a large plate of meat, and walked over. He handed them to Zoro. "You woke up just in time. The banquet's just begun." Zoro accepted the food and sake, a faint smile easing his taut features. "I'm hungry," he said simply. "Let's welcome Zoro back." Kane raised his cup. Everyone echoed him, raising their own and laughing as they drained them. The celebration swelled. Brook tucked his violin under his chin and drew the bow. A lively tune soon filled the night. Yamato dragged Kane and the others into a clumsy dance. Kuma taught Bonnie the Buccaneer Race's Dance of Liberation. Crocus, watching the young people's exuberance, was drawn in and joined them. "I was quite the dancer back with the Roger Pirates," he declared, and they all sang off-key and danced out of step, enjoying a wonderful night. All good things must end. Soon the time for farewells came. "Brook, want to come aboard my ship? We could help you finish your dream," Kane asked before leaving. Brook chuckled. "Yo-ho-ho, thank you, but I'll stay here and spend my days with this old man and Laboon." He refused, as expected. He was no longer young. He didn't want to be a burden on Kane's voyage. "If fate allows, we'll meet again." Kane didn't press it. "Goodbye, everyone," he called. "Laboon, make sure you train your hockey." The Rayquaza slowly set sail from Reverse Mountain, with Laboon's long farewell cry trailing behind. Next stop, Small Garden. A few days later, a forested island appeared on the horizon. 6 active volcanoes dotted the interior, sometimes sighing gray smoke, and 2 enormous dinosaur skulls, like mountains, dominated half the coastline. Small Garden. From a distance, it looked like any other island, but it preserved prehistoric landscapes and was full of ancient creatures, especially dragons and dinosaurs. "Charge, my wargreyman," Yamato whooped, riding a Tyrannosaurus through the trees. The island was a paradise for anyone who loved prehistoric life. Kane, had he been a biologist, would have reveled in it. He only knew the basics: Tyrannosaurus, Triceratops, Pterodactyl, but he ordered some of the fiercest specimens captured. Ancient zones, he thought, bring them to judge for study. He had poured his heart into the beast's pirates. "Hey, there! I found the giant race you mentioned." Violet spoke up, watching through her glare berry. "There are giants here?" Robin's expression tightened. Giants were not common. The last time she'd seen a giant race was when she was 8 during the Buster Call on O'Hara. Saul had saved her life then. He had died in that campaign. A shadow crossed her face at the memory, but Kane, smiling, waved her on. "Let's go." They followed Violet. As they neared, a thunderous roar split the air and the ground trembled. Smoke rose from a distant volcano. Heavy, drum-like footsteps approached. Kane's eyes sharpened. On Small Garden, volcanic eruptions signaled giant duels. "It's starting. Hurry!" They pushed forward and soon came upon 2 enormous figures on either side of the clearing, 20 meters tall. The taller one was lean, wearing an iron-faced helmet, a long beard spilling beneath a dark blue cloak and warrior's armor. He held a giant longsword and a round shield. The shorter was stout, horned iron helmet and a great yellow beard, holding a massive battle axe and a round shield. They were the 2 captains of the giant warrior pirates, Dory and Brogy. The giant warrior pirates, a crew of Elbaf's warriors, had been feared 100 years ago. Their captains had once vanished, and the crew became legend. Now Dory and Brogy stood before Kane, exactly the allies he'd hoped to find among the giant race. "They're not as tall as Two Fangs, but their presence is stronger," Yamato observed, looking up. Kane smiled. Blue Ogre Dory and Red Ogre Brogy. 100 years ago, their bounties were 100 million berries. Naturally, they're stronger than the numbers. The numbers, Kane thought, were imperfect experiments, powerful but not very smart. Two skilled giant warriors fighting together could make up for that. The giants passed down a combined attack technique that made two fighters act as one, producing a force greater than the sum of its parts. That was one reason Kane wanted the giants' friendship. Elbaf's warriors were among the world's strongest. 100 years ago? Bonnie's eyes widened. Then they must be over 100 years old, right? But they look so young. Kane explained. Giants live about 300 years, roughly 3 times as long as humans. 100 years is just entering their prime. Bonnie murmured. 300 years. It was such a distant, unreal number for her. Their conversation caught the giant's attention. Gah, Dory! We've got guests! Brogy boomed, laughing like thunder. Keh! How rare! Dory added, his voice rumbling. They looked at the newcomers not with suspicion, but with simple delight. Guests! Brogy leaned forward eagerly. Did you bring any sake? Dory leaned in, hope in his expression. We haven't tasted sake in a long time. May we have some? Kane blinked, unsure whether to call them naive or delightfully straightforward. Either way, their request suited him perfectly. He turned to Kuma. Kuma, bring all the sake from the ship. I intend to treat our 2 giant friends. By saying it so casually, Kane made himself a friend of the giants. We'll drink later. Please step back to a safe spot for now. Brogy straightened and announced, Dory and I's duel time has come. And without hesitation, the 2 giants readied themselves. Dory gripped his greatsword and shield, face bright with combat spirit. Come on, Brogy, the 69,350th duel, he roared. Fight! Brogy answered. They separated and charged. Their weapons met with an earth-shattering crash as blade and axe slammed into shield. The impact sent a shockwave that snapped nearby trees. Kozuki Hiyori raised her hand to shield herself from the gust. They didn't even use haki, she said in surprise. Kane's expression shifted. It was possible the giants simply weren't using haki. Over the course of their long, repeated duels, tens of thousands of times, Dory and Brogy might have forgotten why they fought, and with time, even forgotten how to call upon haki during those clashes. Losing to someone like Galdino, Mr. 3, wasn't shameful. Galdino was a crafty criminal who had escaped Impel Down and once held his own against Warden Magellan. He had been a master strategist, and later, as part of Buggy's crew, he attained a position of true influence. Against such a tactician, the giants' loss reflected circumstance more than weakness. The contest went on, thunderous and fierce beneath the smoking volcanoes. Kane watched the 2 old rivals clash, twin storm clouds of raw giant power, aware that in their world, strength came in many forms, and alliances could be made over a shared cup of sake as easily as over the heat of battle. Chapter 133, Feast and Duel. The giants' battle raged on. It had to be said, they were a fighting race by nature. Their massive bodies gave them unmatched destructive power. Every clash of weaponry shook the ground, and a single shift of position could level a whole jungle. Sun Saw, Sun Shield. Dory and Brogy shouted in unison, wielding weapon and shield with astonishing coordination. Their tacit understanding was so complete they could have been top-tier Jaeger pilots in Pacific Rim. 69,350 duels over 95 years, an average of 2 fights a day, had made their teamwork second nature. Bang! Greatsword met shield in a thunderous collision. Both men were shoved back a step by the recoil, then immediately regained their footing and threw themselves into the fight again without hesitation. Did all 60,000-plus duels go like this? Ace swallowed hard, watching their swift, merciless fighting. Don't worry, they are literally perfectly matched, Kane said calmly. If there had been even the slightest difference between them, that century-long rivalry would have ended long ago. The 2 giants fought from morning into noon, and at last today's opening duel neared a close. After one last head-on clash, Dory and Brogy were left panting, and their enormous bodies collapsing to the ground with a thunderous boom. Gee, Brogy, looks like it's a draw again. Gabba-ba-ba-ba. Then we'll decide the winner in the next duel. They exchanged a glance and laughed heartily, their faces showing no trace of the life-or-death ferocity from moments before, only the exhilaration of a good fight. They just made up? Violet blinked in surprise. They were fighting to the death. Don't they hold grudges? This is a warrior's duel. Yamato, usually unfamiliar with common sentiments, surprised everyone with a clear insight into the giant's mindset. Only by giving everything is it the greatest respect for your opponent. GGGGG, little girl, you're absolutely right, Dory roared with laughter. Gabba-ba-ba-ba, among warriors there's no holding back. Brogy agreed. Yamato's blunt, battle-hungry words instantly won their favor. If this were a game, their favorability toward her would have definitely spiked. Kane secretly nodded. He had another trick up his sleeve, too. Let's have a feast, he announced, spreading his arms. For the generous, hospitality-loving giants, a feast was irresistible. No friendship a great meal couldn't seal. Dory and Brogy beamed and shouted together. That would be wonderful. Preparations began at once. As hosts, Dory and Brogy hauled over several massive, tender dinosaurs and piled up sweet, juicy fruits. Kuma, who had left earlier, used his powers to bring all the fine wine aboard the Rayquaza, along with seasonings. The bonfire was lit, and the atmosphere hit its peak. To new friends and good food and drink. Cheers, Brogy bellowed. Cheers! G-G-G-G! Dory laughed. Kane and his crew raised their cups. Dory and Brogy hefted wine barrels taller than a person like ordinary men lifting goblets, gulping them down 2 swallows at a time until empty. Not satisfied, they switched hands and kept drinking, barely pausing to touch the roasted meat. After 5 or 6 barrels of fine wine, they finally slowed. Sanji and the others handled the roasting, Sanji with the seasoning, Ace tending the heat, and Zoro doing the cutting. Huge slabs of dinosaur meat were speared on thick tree trunks and roasted over the roaring flames. Fat hissed onto the coals with a sizzle. The smell of roasting meat and wine made everyone's mouths water. It's been a long time since I smelled something this good, Dory said, licking his lips. Please enjoy, Sanji said with a confident smile. The giants didn't stand on ceremony. They grabbed chunks of roasted meat, nearly half the size of an ox, with their bare hands and tore into them, grease dripping, faces alight with satisfaction. Gabba-ba-ba-ba! It's been so long since I've had meat this flavorful. G-G-G-G-G, paired with fine wine, it's heaven. Even giants, not usually picky eaters, found themselves scorning their old fare. After eating and drinking their fill, the two finally remembered to ask the most important question. Friends, who are you? Dory asked casually. Giants had the ease born of great strength. Confronting a group of strangers, they only now inquired about them. I am Kane, and these are my important companions, Kane said, smiling as he introduced everyone. We are pirates of the Beast's Pirates. The Beast's Pirates? Dory and Brogy exchanged puzzled looks. Never heard of them. Not surprising. They'd been on Small Garden for nearly a century and didn't keep up with the outside world. The only information that reached them came in sporadic scraps from passing pirates. Kane briefly explained the Beast's Pirates' status as one of the 4 emperors of the New World. Oh, that sounds truly impressive, Dory exclaimed. Gabba-ba-ba-ba! Feels more formidable than our giant warrior pirates ever were, Brogy added. The giant warrior pirates had been famous in their day, but they hadn't ruled an empire like the New World. Dory and Brogy glanced at each other, that old, wordless understanding flashing between them, and a warlike grin spread across both faces. Shall we have a duel? They offered in unison, eager anticipation in their voices. Yes, yes! Yamato sprang forward like a rabbit, ready to jump in. As she took 2 steps, her collar tightened. Kane gently held her back. Kaney, she pouted, cheeks puffing out in displeasure. Let me go first this time. Kane smiled and guided the reluctant Yamato behind him. Since his ability had awakened, he hadn't truly unleashed it. These 2 giant warriors should be able to handle it. Hopefully. Then come on. Dory and Brogy roared and hefted their weapons. Kane leapt up. Green light flooded his body, stretching and twisting. In a flash, a massive emerald dragon coiled across the sky, casting a huge shadow. So big, bigger than the ancient giant race, Brogy marveled, and a fierce fighting spirit lit his eyes. Facing such an opponent was too delicious to pass up. The emerald dragon's body shifted, golden light blooming over it as it swelled further. 4 ribbons of sacred golden light formed behind its head. The golden radiance showered down like a rain of sparks. Mega Rayquaza, Kane's divine form, had appeared. J, his aura's risen to a new level, Dory said, licking his dry lips and gripping his sword and shield with renewed fanaticism. Let's settle this in one move. Use your giant race's strongest combined technique. Kane's voice boomed from the sky with undeniable command. He intended to take them both on. Dory and Brogy didn't feel disrespected. They knew full well that against such a being, only their combined strength offered a chance. Giants were fierce and straightforward, but not fools. They respected strength and judged wisely. Kane hovered at about 1,000 meters, not going too high. There was no need to charge forever. On the island, the two giants held their breath and stared up with solemn faces. Then a point of emerald light flared, rapidly expanding like a supernova and lighting the sky. "Dragon Ascent!" Kane cried. A destructive emerald aura enveloped him. His body stiffened like a green arrow, and he dove straight down at a speed that blurred sight. Here it comes. Dory and Brogy's pupils shrank. They didn't have observation hockey, but decades of warriors' intuition told them that if they didn't fight with everything they had, they would die. They exchanged one glance and acted. Both discarded their round shields and gripped their greatsword and great axe with both hands. Muscles bulged as they swung with all their might, the sword and axe colliding with mountain-splitting force. "Hakoku!" they thundered. Boom! One red, one blue. Two immense energy waves erupted from their weapons and twisted together into a towering shockwave. Where it passed, the air itself shrieked as if ready to shred the world. The combined shockwave smashed into the diving emerald meteor of Kane. Time seemed to stop. For a heartbeat, the gargantuan shockwave halted the emerald descent. Then, with overwhelming force, Kane broke through. Boom! It was as if a sun detonated. A blinding fireball expanded outward, the roar so loud it threatened eardrums. The island of Small Garden quaked. Tsunamis rose along the coast. Before the dust could settle, the emerald figure burst free through the inferno and smoke, still streaking down with undiminished momentum toward the two giants. Dory and Brogy swung to block like meteors striking Earth. The ground beneath them collapsed into a massive crater. Spiderweb cracks spread wildly. Thick smoke and dust billowed up. The secondary shockwave rippled out in a ring, snapping trees dozens of meters away. "Be careful." Kuma and Yamato, the fastest on Kane's side, flashed forward and unleashed their abilities and haki, shielding everyone from the aftershock. Then a whirlwind swept over the battlefield, as if alive, gathering smoke and dust and carrying it away. With the air cleared, the scene at the center of the pit came into view. Kane had already changed back into human form, standing in the middle of the massive crater. The wind had been under his control. On either side of him, Dory and Brogy lay sprawled, unconscious. Their chests rose and fell. They were knocked out, not killed. It had been deliberate. Kane had wanted to spar, not annihilate. He had restrained Dragon Ascent as much as he could, but the move still exceeded his expectations. It truly lived up to the legend of Rayquaza's ultimate attack, a technique that once let Rayquaza contend with the primal forces of Kyogre and Groudon. Kane had the sudden, uneasy thought that charged in the atmosphere or outside it, the move could level an island. "Kane, you went too far. You beat Dory and Brogy like this," Yamato started, her voice sharp. Then her tone shifted into a pout. "Now how am I supposed to duel them?" "Only you," Kane thought, smiling helplessly. "Don't worry, I controlled the force. Giants like them will probably wake by this afternoon." At that, Yamato's mood brightened instantly. She would still get her duel. Chapter 134, Elbaf, Linlin, and the Nuns Passed. Kane's estimate had been spot on. As soon as night fell, the two giants woke up, just as he expected. "Is dinner ready?" Brogy asked, his big face leaning close to the bonfire, eyes fixed on the spit where meat sizzled. "You woke up just in time," Kane said with a smile and invited them to join the feast. Dory and Brogy didn't bother with pleasantries. Each grabbed a massive leg of Brachiosaurus and devoured it with the ferocity of men who'd just come out of a pitched battle. Intense combat had burned a lot of stamina. They were starving. Only after eating an amount of roasted meat nearly the size of a kuma did they finally let out long, satisfied sighs and begin to recover. "Gah, Kane!" Brogy wiped his mouth and asked curiously, "Are all the people in the New World as strong as you?" Before Kane could answer, his younger brother Sanji cut in with unmistakable admiration. "How could that be? Big brother Kane is undoubtedly at the top of the world." Kane accepted the flattery with a small smile. He hadn't quite reached the very peak after his awakening, but he was undeniably a top-tier powerhouse, a Yonko-level combatant in his own right. In truth, the number of people on that level wasn't tiny. Kaido, Charlotte Linlin, Whitebeard, red-haired Shanks. And then there were other mysterious but formidable figures scattered through the New World and beyond. On the Marine side, Sengoku, Garp, and the Admirals were hardly to be underestimated. The world government, with secrets like Emu and the immortal Gorosei, loomed even larger. Kane's brief surge of ego from his newfound power cooled quickly. The revolution hadn't won yet. There was still work to do. Fortunately, he could still advance further by consuming meteorites, so hope remained. Suddenly, the idea of eating stones felt strangely appealing. Brogy was unconvinced that anyone besides the two of them could have bested them together in a single move. Dory laughed and mused aloud, "Heh heh, it seems many incredible powerhouses have appeared in the New World. Brogy, we might have been away for far too long." Speaking of which, Violet seized the moment. What exactly made you duel for nearly 100 years? She genuinely couldn't see any deep-seated hatred between the two. Dory and Brogy exchanged a glance, scratched their heads in unison, then burst into hearty laughter. "We forgot about that a long, long time ago." "Eh!" everyone echoed in surprise. Kane's mouth twitched. If he recalled correctly, the whole quarrel had started with a little girl's innocent question about whose Sea King catch was bigger. Pride and warrior spirit took over, and a duel was declared. They had simply kept fighting. If no one had intervened, they might have grown old and died on that island, one small question turning into a lifetime vow. For the giants, however, it was never about hatred. It was about faith and honor. Kane respected that quiet stubbornness. "Dory, Brogy," Yamato said, eyes bright with curiosity, "tell me about Elbaf." Interest rippled through the group. The giant kingdom had a legendary reputation, and everyone leaned in as Dory and Brogy traded stories. In their words, a grand image of Elbaf unfurled. The Atom Tree that supported the nation, Elbaf's 3 regions, the Heavenly Realm, the Sun Realm, and the Underworld, the Rainbow Bridge wide enough for large ships, and the distinctive giant villages. Of course, as boisterous warriors, the two focused most on the countless taverns and their fine wines. The pictures they painted stirred hearts and imaginations. Yamato's eyes shone like a child hearing a fairy tale, and she kept exclaiming, "Wow!" Robin rested her chin on her hand, occasionally jotting notes in her notebook. Ace and Zoro listened with blood racing, eager for a new adventure. Kane listened with a thoughtful look, comparing what he heard with what he already knew. After describing customs, Dory moved on to history and belief. Brogy spoke reverently. "We giants worship the great sun god. Every winter solstice we hold a grand 12-day festival, fasting to show our reverence." Sun god? That name rang a bell for many. They remembered the sun god Nika that Kane had mentioned back on Fishman Island. All eyes turned toward him, curious. Kane nodded. "The sun god the giants worship is indeed Nika," he confirmed. "But Joy Boy isn't the sun god the giants worship." He explained that the timing didn't fit. Considering the giants' average lifespan of about 300 years, the Void Century was only a few generations back for them. Recent, not mythic. It seemed likely that earlier ages, long before Joy Boy, had seen advanced powers or even powerful beings associated with the sun god motif. Brogy grinned at Kuma and bellowed with laughter. "Gah! I never thought we worshipped the same god. What a coincidence." Bonnie pumped her small fist proudly. "I can do the dance of liberation." She rose and began dancing around the bonfire, mimicking the movements perfectly. Dory's eyes lit up. "That posture! I've seen it on ancient murals on the Atom Tree." Robin, as an archaeologist, picked up on something unsettling. For a faith to be shared across such vast distances, Elbaf in the New World and Kuma's home all the way in the North Blue, there had to be a historical explanation. How could beliefs and rituals spread so far in an age when crossing oceans was a major ordeal? And then there was the world-spanning war Kane had mentioned. With ancient technology, how had that war affected the whole globe? Robin moved to Kane, eyes alight with questions. Kane winked and teased, and Robin, who knew him well, blushed and pecked him on the cheek. He whispered a few words that made her face flush deeper. Then he grew serious. "Who says our technology is automatically more advanced than the past?" he said. "I don't know all the details, but long ago, Travelers from far beyond this sea came here with very advanced technology. For them, crossing oceans wasn't the problem it is for us. He offered to help Robin find poneglyphs and ruins to learn more, but he stressed that much of his knowledge was speculation. Better to uncover the past with their own hands than take his theories as gospel. The giants asked after the giant warrior pirates. Kane had to deliver hard news. Because of your disappearance, the giant warrior pirates disbanded a long time ago. Brogy's grip tightened on his sake barrel. Though he never regretted the duel, the thought that the crew that had carried their honors and memories had dissolved brought a sting of sorrow. Kane continued, "It gets worse. Your crew members were captured by the Marines on their way back to Elbaf and were almost executed." Dory's hand shot to the hilt of his enormous sword, veins standing out. Brogy's face contorted in anger. "Damn the Marines. Don't get yourself worked up. Let me finish." Kane raised a hand to calm them. "I said almost. At the time, a nun named Carmel intervened. She persuaded the Marines that executing giant crew would provoke Elbaf, and so they released them." Relief spread across Dory and Brogy's faces. "So she was a good person," they breathed. Kane shook his head, and his words chilled the air. "Quite the opposite. It was a ruse. Carmel was working with the Marines and the world government. She used that act to gain the giants' trust, infiltrate Elbaf, and secretly select giant soldiers to be taken away." He delivered the worst blow. Carmel was also a human trafficker. Under the name Lamb's House, she sheltered homeless orphans, then sold them to the Marines or CP agencies. Carmel's disguise had been terrifyingly effective. By saving the giant warrior pirates, she'd won the goodwill of Elbaf. She even set up Lamb's House inside Elbaf, using the giants as an unwitting shield for her crimes. The revelation sparked outrage. "That bastard!" Dory and Brogy's gratitude turned to towering rage. Yamato and the nearby pirates were equally furious. Even among thieves, preying on children was the bottom of the barrel. "Don't worry, Carmel paid for her deeds," Kane said softly. Everyone's curiosity flared. What could make Carmel suffer for that sin? Kane answered without hesitation. "The child she provoked was Charlotte Linlin. Yes, the Charlotte Linlin who is now one of the Yonko." The reaction was immediate. Eyes widened, jaws dropped. Kane continued. "This happened around 56 years ago. Linlin had been abandoned by her birth family because of her unusually large body and insatiable appetite. Carmel took her in. The trouble started during a giant winter festival. 5-year-old Linlin had an outburst she couldn't control. The giants tried to stop her. Her strength was beyond their expectation. The giant hero Jorul was killed in an instant, and the whole village was destroyed. Carmel had to move Lamb's House out of Elbaf." There was a heavy silence. 5 years old, able to kill a giant hero, destroy a village. The image made people's blood run cold. Kane added, "Jorul was one of the captains of the giant warrior pirates, a revered hero. It's a tragedy no one could have imagined." Bonnie, perhaps because she and Linlin shared an appetite and a childhood of hardship, felt a pang of sympathy. She gripped Kuma's warm hand tightly and, voice trembling, whispered, "Papa, Bonnie will eat less from now on. You won't abandon Bonnie, will you?" Kuma's large hand stroked her head. His eyes were full of warmth and resolve. "My little girl, how could Papa ever abandon you? You are my treasure. Don't say such things. Don't ever starve yourself, understand?" I understand, Papa." Bonnie's face brightened. Kane went on. "When Linlin was 6, Carmel and the children threw her a birthday party. Linlin overate and went berserk again. 9 days later, Sister Carmel and all the children from Lamb's House vanished. They were never seen again. A sudden gust of wind rattled the bonfire, throwing their faces into shifting shadow. Bonnie buried herself in Kuma's arms. Sanji, a chef by trade, turned pale. The association between food and disappearance made his stomach churn. "You mean the nun and the children were eaten?" "Who knows?" Kane said, shrugging. "Only Strossen, who was there, might know the truth, and even Linlin has a blank in that part of her memory." Kane's shrug said it all. The old records were hazy, Oda's accounts were cryptic, and much of the truth was buried, maybe by covert agencies, maybe by chaos. Perhaps Linlin, in the confusion, ate a devil fruit like the soul fruit that changed everything. Or perhaps CP0 dealt with Carmel and took the children. There were many possibilities. For now, no one could say for sure. Chapter 135, Yamato vs. Titan, Drum Kingdom. Alright, let's put Charlotte Linland's little secret aside. Before anyone could finish reacting to the previous shock, Kane changed the subject and dropped another bombshell. About 50 years after the giant warrior pirates disbanded, your comrades Kashi and Oimo set sail again to find you. They were tricked by the Marines into becoming guards at Eni's lobby, where they remain to this day. What? Dory and Brogy exploded in outrage, their massive bodies rising with a thud that made the ground tremble. Kane went on, "The Marines lied, saying you had been arrested. To secure their freedom, Kashi and Oimo had to serve the world government for 100 years. Shameless." Brogy's fists clenched until cracks spidered through the stone beneath them. His eyes flashed with fury. Kashi and Oimo had been their closest comrades in the giant warrior pirates. Learning they'd been lured into a trap because of them felt like a brand to the heart. They could not stay put. "We must save them," Dory said, resolute. "That goes without saying," Brogy answered. The century-long duel between them didn't matter now. Rescuing their friends came first. "Need help?" "Eni's lobby isn't easy to break into," Kane offered with a smile, though he clearly didn't take the court seriously. Dory and Brogy shook their heads as one. "We won't drag our friends into danger for our sake," Dory said. "We'll rescue them with our own strength," Brogy added. The two giants shared a look. Pride and confidence flared in their eyes. They laughed together, booming and bright. "We are the captains of the giant warrior pirates." Seeing they were determined, Kane didn't insist. Truth be told, with Dory and Brogy's power, taking Eni's lobby alone was hardly a challenge. Add Kashi and Oimo, and it would be over before it began. Eni's lobby was a court of judgment, no detention power, relatively weak militarily, so there wouldn't be overwhelming forces there. Still, Kane dug into his coat and pulled out a Den Mushi, handing it over. "If you run into trouble, use this to contact me." "Thank you." Dory accepted the tiny snail with careful, thick-fingered hands and tucked it into his chest pouch. "We're friends. No need to thank me," Kane laughed. "Gah!" The two giants bellowed in hearty laughter. With Dory and Brogy on friendly terms, Kane felt sure he could win more of the giant race, and maybe all of Elbaf. There was, however, one potential problem. Jabba, that schemer, had deep roots in Elbaf. Having married a giant, Jabba was treated almost like a member of their society. If he opposed Kane's use of Elbaf's power, it could be a real complication. Worse, Jabba was unusually close to Shanks, and Kane had just come to blows with the red hair pirates. In the worst case, they'd have to fight. After a night of feasting, morning came on the second day. Yamato, who'd been itching for a fight with a giant, finally got her chance. There was one move in a giant battle everyone wanted to feel. Hakoku! Dory and Brogy roared in unison, their giant sword and battle axe clashing with a thunderous impact. A terrifying shockwave, like a released beast, surged toward Yamato. It was a hit that could split mountains and shake seas. Yamato's eyes showed no fear, only a burning fighting spirit. "If Kane can do it, so can I." "Thunder Bagua," she cried, gripping her spiked club. Lightning coiled around it as she charged straight into the shockwave without dodging. The club slammed into the torrent of force, and a suppressed explosion ripped out. Yamato fought with everything she had, but after several seconds, she could not hold the stalemate. The impact hurled her through the air. She crashed into a distant pile of rocks, and a cloud of dust rose. "Yamato!" Everyone gasped and turned to Kane. How had he managed to face that same technique and come out on top while Yamato had been blasted away? Kane only shook his head, a little amused. The girl had tried to meet Hakoku as a normal human. She hadn't shifted into her beast-human form. It wasn't that Hakoku was weak. It was that his power was simply beyond comparison. Hakoku was a terrifying technique that unleashed the combined strength of two giants. In the original tales, where combat power was not so inflated, its debut had felled a monstrous island-eating goldfish. Its strength was undeniable. On a true battlefield, it was terrifying. Yamato's voice came from the rubble, cheerful despite the dust. Stones rolled, and she hauled herself upright, a little disheveled but undiminished. "Heh, I guess it's time to get serious." White fur sprouted rapidly across her body, White Wolf Yamato. In an instant, she vanished from her original spot. "Mamabaroshi Jin." The The spiked club, wrapped in biting cold, transformed into a streak of white lightning that slammed toward Dory. He raised his giant shield in a hurry. Boom! The club struck the shield, and the explosion forced Dory's enormous arm backward. For a moment, the tiny wolf form Yamato held a stalemate with the giant. "Not over yet," she grinned. The cold on the club erupted like a tide and washed across Dory's body from the shield outward. The freezing spread too fast for his bulk to dodge. In moments, an enormous ice sculpture of a giant stood frozen on the field. "Sun axe!" Brogy shouted, and with that, a colossal axe, charged with wind and thunder, descended behind Yamato. The girl was unperturbed, delighted even. Cold surged from beneath her feet, forming a solid ice platform. She stomped down hard, using the reactive force to spin midair and face the axe. Ice slash! Using the downward momentum, the spiked club drew a frigid arc and met the howling axe blow for blow. Boom! The crowd watched in horror and awe as Brogy, hill-sized, was sent flying by that single blow. Yamato had faced Dory and Brogy and emerged the victor. She strode back to Kane's side with a touch of unmasked disappointment. The combo attack that had initially nearly taken her down had been the only real challenge. Afterward, it had been almost one giant per hit, far from the full-throttle fight she had hoped for. "That's to be expected," Kane explained. "Don't be fooled by their century-long duel. It was a private training between two people. Their progress was limited. To grow quickly, you need to fight opponents with different styles. No matter what kind of enemy, if they're notable, there's something worth learning." Luffy had done exactly that, learning Gear Second from Blue Nose Speed and using Bellamy's spring-like legs for more agility. Dory and Brogy, no matter how long they fought each other, could only learn so much. That's why their strength hadn't really advanced over the last century. Once they returned to Elbaf and updated their knowledge, their growth would surge. After all, to be the captains of the giant warrior pirates, their talent was obvious. After Dory and Brogy recovered fully, Kane's group bid them farewell. The two giants still needed to find a ship on the island suitable for long voyages, so the groups parted there. "Goodbye, big guys," people called. "See you again," the giants boomed. The Rayquaza slipped away slowly. Everyone on deck waved reluctantly as the two giants stood on the shore. Dory suddenly remembered something and shouted toward the departing ship. "Oh, right. Watch the sea to the west. There's an island-eating monster goldfish. Don't let it attack your ship." Before his warning faded, the sea beneath the Rayquaza blackened and a vast shadow rose. Waves surged and an enormous shape broke the surface, a goldfish, absurdly large, comparable to Laboon. Its open mouth alone towered above the ship's mast. "Humph, all brawn and no brains," someone muttered. Kane and the others leaned on the rail, calm and even amused. A beast of this scale would only frighten small crews. After seeing the 100-meter sea beasts in Fishman Island, this goldfish looked almost cute. "Who wants to flex?" Kane asked lazily, glancing back at his crew. Yamato pouted. This kind of opponent didn't interest her. Zoro, Sanji, and Ace stepped forward with eager looks. Time to shoulder their captain's burdens and show how they'd grown. Sanji leaped onto the goldfish's snout and began spinning in midair. At the peak of his spin, he drove his right foot down into the fish's head with a devastating kick. The creature shrieked, its consciousness clouding and eyes rolling back. Even Dory and Brogy watched impressed. These youngsters carried serious power. Zoro appeared beside the floundering fish. Three-sword style, Twister. He spun like a top with all three blades, leaving countless slashes across the fish's tough hide. Blood sprayed, scales and bone exposed, the clear sea running red. "You two can't hog the glory," Ace laughed, raising both arms as flames coiled around them. "Divine fire, Higan." He thrust his hands and launched two thick spears of fire like meteors straight down the goldfish's gaping throat. They struck deep, and Ace snapped his fingers. Boom! An explosion ripped from inside the fish. Intense flames erupted within its mouth. Screech! The goldfish let out a mournful scream as smoke and fire belched out. Under the triple assault, even an island-eating behemoth crumpled. Its massive body convulsed and then went limp, collapsing on the surface like a floating knoll. A faint smell of charred, flame-grilled fish drifted over the deck. Kane, Yamato, and Bonnie tilted their heads and sniffed eagerly. That smells pretty good," Kane said, stroking his chin. Yamato had already swallowed at the thought. It smells delicious. Then let's try some, Kane decided. Bonnie cheered. Sanji brought back the prize cut, the cheek meat behind the gill cover. Small but firm and tender from the fish's constant breath work. They ate their fill. The goldfish's only real contribution of the day was a good meal. After several days of sailing, a white-capped island came into view, Drum Island. It was one of Kane's primary destinations in the Grand Line. There's a country on that island called the Drum Kingdom, Kuma said softly, looking at the snowbound island. It used to be a world-renowned center of medical excellence. I wanted to bring Bonnie there for treatment once. But about a year ago, King Wapol launched a tyrannical doctor purge, expelling almost all the country's excellent physicians. The once great medical nation was now a hollow name. Now, the only competent doctors left are Wapol's personal physicians. If ordinary citizens want care, they must crawl for the tyrant's favor, Kuma continued, shaking his head. Because of Bonnie's Azure Scale disease, Kuma had consulted many famous doctors and countless medical records and had learned a great deal about Drum Kingdom's tragic decline. Chapter 136, Dalton Chopper. Kane led his companions onto the winter island. Kozuki Hiyori, bundled in a thick cotton coat, walked steadily over the fluffy snow, each step crunching beneath her feet. A white breath clouded the air as she asked, curious, "Lord Kane, why are we here on this island?" Kane chuckled. He wore casual clothes and seemed entirely unaffected by the biting cold. "To find someone, I need his strength." As a weather controller, immunity to cold and heat was a passive trait for Kane. Reiju, the product of genetic modification, was also dressed lightly. Even here in the frozen landscape, she confidently showed off a pair of pale, slender legs. "Is it the doctor?" she asked. Ace, wielder of the Mera Mera no Mi, was inappropriately dressed for the snow in shorts and a short-sleeved shirt. According to Mr. Kuma, this island used to be a renowned medical nation. That's probably what we can find here. Indeed, the crew's ship, the Rayquaza, lacked only a formidable physician to be perfectly rounded. The doctors aboard could handle headaches, fevers, and surface wounds, but none of them were legendary healers. Kane shook his head. He's not a doctor, not exactly. At best, he's a collaborator. On Drum Island, the one he could truly consider a crew member was Chopper, but judging by the timeline, the little reindeer was likely still under the care of the eccentric Dr. Hiluluk, years away from studying under Dr. Kureha and graduating. Kane couldn't afford to wait. If he wanted a proper doctor, he could have invited Kureha herself, but Chopper's rumble ball had its own value. It could interfere with animal-type devil fruit transformations, add multiple transformation forms, and, when combined with multiple berries, could simulate a pseudo-awakened state, even granting the mink tribe access to a Sulong-like form. It was more reliable than the dangerous medicines from Fishman Island. Hey, Kane, look what I found!" Yamato and Bonnie's laughter came from the side. Yamato, with Bonnie in her arms, leaped out of a snowdrift, riding a giant rabbit. The rabbit's forehead bore several fresh bumps, and it looked teary-eyed, clearly disciplined by Yamato's rough affection. "Judy, stop!" Yamato scolded, patting the rabbit's head. Obedient, the animal froze. Kane's mouth twitched. If his eyes weren't deceiving him, the rabbit was male. "Kane, can we bring Judy back? He loves playing with me so much. He jumped on me the moment he saw me." Of course he did. Kane immediately recognized the breed, a Lapon, a beast unique to Drum Island, fierce, herd-oriented, and normally hostile to humans. Only under the overwhelming dominance of someone like Yamato would it submit. With Yamato on its back, the rabbit looked up at him with helpless, pleading eyes as if begging, "Please don't let her take me." Kane didn't mind an extra mouth on the ship, but Lapon were adapted to snow and thick fur. Outside Drum Island, they'd struggle and might even die from heat. "No," he said with a smile. "Playing here is enough. Its kits are waiting." At his gesture, a small rabbit, only as tall as his knee, peeked cautiously from behind a rock. Yamato's mood shifted at once. Carefree again, she resumed playing with the Lapan family. Laughing and joking, the group made their way to a nearby town. Drum Kingdom had once been a great medical nation, but its overall development was modest. Small towns scattered across the island rather than large cities, the environment too harsh to support dense centers. Their first priority in town was a place to rest and gather information, a tavern. Taverns were always good for rumors. When they pushed open the heavy wooden door, the bell jingled crisply, and every patron's attention snapped to them. They first stared at Kuma, the giant, and then at the man in front, and a sharp scream cut the tavern's murmur into pieces. Ah! It's Calamity Kane. The beast pirates have attacked. Panic swept through the room like a thrown stone through still water. Tables knocked over, stools tumbled, people scrambled under furniture or toward the back door, only to collide with others trying to flee. Faces went pale, some slumped to the floor. The tavern's noise turned to a chaotic cacophony of crashing crockery and breathless cries. Kane was used to this. Even in the New World, a lineup like his sent many into fear. He walked calmly to the bar, looked at the bartender, trembling like a quail, and said softly, "Could you get us some drinks? And that little girl would like juice." He nodded at Bonnie. "Oh, of course," the bartender stammered, but his hands shook so badly a glass slipped and smashed. "Boss, I'm sorry, I was wrong." He dropped to his knees, tears running down his cheeks. Kane touched his face with amusement. "I'm not that frightening," he thought. "All right, get up. I won't get mad if you pour the drinks correctly." The bartender scrambled to his feet and, hands still trembling, poured drinks for them. Just as he thought the crisis had passed, Kane asked, "Do you know where Dr. Correja lives?" "Huh?" The bartender blinked, surprised that such an imposing figure would seek that eccentric woman, but he did know. He pointed toward the snowy mountains beyond the town. "The Drum Peaks. The highest central peak is where Dr. Correja lives." "Thanks." Kane drained his glass and then, smiling, asked another favor. "Would you sell me a batch of drinks?" The bartender's jaw dropped. He'd expected to be robbed, not asked to buy supplies. "What? No problem. Of course, Lord Kane." Kane indicated Robin. "You can arrange the details with this beautiful lady." Robin glided forward and began discussing specifics. The doorbell jingled again in a rush as the tavern door flew open, letting in a bitter wind and a swirl of snow. A squad of guards marched in, bundled in heavy coats, led by a tall man carrying a huge iron shovel. The remaining customers stiffened when they recognized him. Their eyes brightened, their postures steadied. "My name is Dalton, captain of this country's guard," he announced. He then fixed Kane with a steady gaze. "Calamity Kane, we welcome you as a guest, but do not bring harm to this country. Drum Kingdom is affiliated with the world government," he continued, as if spurred on by duty. "King Wapol went to marry Gioi's last year for the World Conference. If you cause trouble here, the world government and the Marines will not ignore it." The soldiers behind him, trembling but resolute, took a step forward to back up their captain. Kane's eyes softened with a hint of admiration. Courage was an anthem he respected. Those little steps in the face of him, bounty of 2.4 billion in all, deserved recognition. "Dalton, is it?" "Admirable," Kane said, clapping once. "To lead men like that, you must be a fine fellow. Ever consider being king of this country?" The question hit like a thunderclap. Townspeople and soldiers fell silent, stunned. Dalton bristled. "I have never had such thoughts, do not have them, and never will. King Wapol is the only king of this land." Kane smiled, offering no reply beyond a final, casual remark. "I hope you don't regret it later." Dalton, realizing he couldn't press the issue, led his guard out. As they walked back to the castle, one soldier began to speak up about what Kane had said, but Dalton cut him off sharply. "If you want to avoid punishment, shut your mouth. You don't take a pirate's words seriously. He was only trying to sow discord." The soldier swallowed his comment. In his heart, though, the fair-minded Captain Dalton seemed a far better ruler than the capricious and despotic Wapol. Kane and his group finished buying supplies and set off toward the Drum Peaks. As they lumbered over a ridge, Yamato, bouncing on a rabbit, suddenly shouted, "Look! Are there raccoons here?" Kane turned. A small blue-nosed reindeer in a pink hat and dark red shorts was crawling on his knees through the snow. It was Tony Chopper, but he was in terrible shape. He was covered in blood, one antler snapped, the area around his left eye swollen shut, and he limped painfully with each step. Still, despite the injuries, a small, satisfied smile lingered on his face. "Baka, I'm not a raccoon, I'm a reindeer, I'm a reindeer!" Chopper insisted, correcting Yamato even in his battered state. When he tried to keep protesting, his weak body betrayed him, and he collapsed into the snow with a heavy thud, spraying powder. Kane frowned and hurried over with the others. Yamato gently turned him over. Bonnie noticed something odd immediately. Why is he holding a mushroom? A brightly colored mushroom was clutched to Chopper's chest. He refused to let go, even while unconscious. Kuma's deep voice held something like pity. That mushroom means a great deal to him. Kane checked Chopper and, relieved to feel his chest rise and fall, instructed, Kuma, take away his pain and fatigue. Kuma complied without hesitation. He removed his gloves and pressed his large padded paw against Chopper. A red, paw-shaped aura separated gently from the reindeer's body. Kane reached out and caught that aura. Brute as it was, it transferred pain and exhaustion from Chopper to Kane. Wounds that might have been life-threatening for Chopper were, in Kane's hands, no worse than a superficial scratch. The sharp sensations faded before he could dwell on them. Kuma's power didn't heal directly, but removing the pain let Chopper's own body recover at full force, dramatically speeding the natural healing process. Before long, Chopper's eyelids fluttered open. "Where's my amudake?" he croaked, fingers scrabbling at his chest. Relief flooded his face when he found the precious mushroom still clutched tight. Gathering his strength, he lifted his head and looked up at the strangers who had come to his aid. Chapter 137, Chopper and Hiluluk. Who are you? Who are we? Kane leaned close to Chopper, a sinister smile playing on his lips. We're the beast catchers, he said. We travel the seas to capture rare animals like you and sell them to rich, powerful buyers. Sigh, Big Brother Kane's acting bug has really bitten him. Kozuki Hiyori and the others exchanged helpless looks but kept solemn faces on the outside, playing along. We're bad guys, they practically shouted. Eh? Chopper's face drained of color, and his whole body began to tremble. But to everyone's surprise, he didn't run. Can you wait until I give the Amu mushroom to Dr. Hiluluk before you catch me? Tears welled in his eyes. He looked up at Kane with a pleading expression, voice breaking. Please don't worry. I promise I won't run away. Oh, you're going to use that to kill the fellow Hiluluk? Kane's smile turned playful. Seeing how cooperative you are, I might be kind enough to help you with that little favor. What nonsense, Chopper protested, clutching the mushroom. I'd never hurt Hiluluk. This is a panacea that cures all diseases. Kane shook his head. You're wrong. That's a toxic mushroom. How can that be? You're lying. Chopper froze as if struck by lightning. The hoof holding the mushroom trembled. He couldn't accept it, so he hastily took off his little backpack, pulled out a thick medical book, and fumbled to a page. Look, this pattern is drawn right here. Hiluluk told me it's a symbol of hope. How can it be poisonous? He pointed at a skull symbol in the book, pleading. Only then did everyone realize this simple reindeer had no formal medical training, could barely read, and lacked the most basic common sense. You've got it wrong, little reindeer, Bonnie said, lifting her cute face with a touch of pride. That symbol means danger, poisonous. Why is this happening? The light of hope in Chopper's eyes went out. He sagged as if color had drained from him, frozen for a moment like stone. After a long silence, he bowed his head and, choking back sobs, whispered, Then, can I at least say goodbye to Hiluluk before I leave with you? Seeing the little reindeer so pitiable, Kane's teasing mood softened. I was just joking before. He looked at Chopper more kindly. We're not beast catchers. We're just passing pirates. Pirates? Real pirates? The word didn't frighten Chopper like it did the townsfolk. His face brightened and his eyes sparkled again. Are you the kind who flies skull flags? That's right. We're the beast's pirates. Yamato tilted her head and said, So can you save Hiluluk? Chopper clutched at Kane's pant leg with both hooves. If you can save him, I'll pay any price. I'm useful. I can chop wood, wash dishes, mop floors. Watching Chopper's earnest self-promotion, Hiyori and the others fell quiet, seeing something of their own past desperation in him. Any light, no matter how faint, was worth grasping. Violet bit her lip, reluctant to decide for Kane. Kane said nothing for a long moment, staring at Chopper. Chopper's heart sank as the silence stretched. Just as he was about to break, Kane's mouth curved. Deal. That's wonderful. Chopper clung to the promise like a lifeline, tears streaming. Kane's tone turned serious. I can try to save him, but I can't guarantee success. There was still some healing tears left, but against Hiluluk's terminal illness, its effectiveness was uncertain. If Princess Manchuri were here, it would be different. Chopper swallowed and bowed deeply. No problem. Thank you. Thank you so much. He knew this might be the last chance. Even Dr. Kureha could only delay death, and with 10 days left, Hiluluk couldn't wait for other cures. Kane and his group set off, following Chopper toward a nearby high peak, Hiluluk's home. On the way, Chopper introduced himself and told, in fragments, how he met Hiluluk. When he described how Hiluluk, to earn the trust of a wary, injured reindeer, stripped off all his clothes in the snow to prove he meant no harm, everyone felt respect. He was an extraordinary man. He once saw a pirate with a terminal illness cured by cherry blossoms. Chopper's eyes shone as he recounted. So he spent his life researching and trying to recreate those miracle cherry blossoms. He said it was a panacea that would cure everything. Hearing that they were pirates, it made sense why Chopper had begged them for help. Men who fly skull flags can accomplish anything, Chopper repeated, beaming. About 10 minutes later, they arrived at Hiluluk's treehouse. It was less a doctor's home than a chemist's lab. Alcohol lamps, reagent bottles, distillation apparatus, and experimental gear were everywhere. Hiluluk, I'm back, Chopper called, but his voice died as he froze. The room was empty. All the equipment had been neatly put away and organized, unlike Hiluluk's usual habit. A bad premonition seized Chopper. Crash! The door burst open, and a tall, white-haired woman in a crop top stood in the doorway, flanked by heavy snow. Chopper turned in shock. Dr. Kureha? Chopper? Dr. Kureha's sharp eyes swept the empty room. Where is Hiluluk? Her brows tightened. He's not here. Chopper shook his head numbly. No, that idiot! Kureha's face darkened as she cursed. Then she noticed the wounds and blood on Chopper's body. Her expression grew sterner. Chopper, how did you get those? Can you still move? Chopper forced himself to wipe the fresh blood from his forehead and answered loudly. I can. Dr. Kureha, has something happened to Hiluluk? That idiot has probably fallen for Wapol's trap and walked straight into it at the castle. Dr. Kureha spat. Everyone on Drum Island knew Wapol's character. The message that all 20 doctors in the castle were sick, if left untreated, Drum Kingdom would have no doctors, was clearly a lure. Wapol planned to draw in anyone who might challenge him and have them caught. With every other doctor gone, the people would have no choice but to bow to Wapol's so-called Dr. 20. Get on, Dr. Kureha ordered. Chopper didn't hesitate. He transformed into his beast form, his everyday form being the human beast type, and bent his forelegs, inviting Dr. Kureha to ride on his back. She flipped gracefully up and clamped onto him without words. In the next instant, the reindeer and the old doctor shot out like an arrow into the snowstorm, quickly disappearing from sight, leaving Kane and his group staring after them in confusion. Wow, Chopper can transform! Yamato was the first to react, pointing in the direction they'd gone, eyes bright. Kane's mouth twitched. Sounds interesting. Shall we follow and see? Of course, everyone answered in unison. There was nothing of interest left in the empty treehouse, and their original quarry, Dr. Kureha, had already left. Following the action would be perfect. Drum Royal City, grand only in name, sat atop Drum Peak. In front of the castle gates, soldiers stood in formation, and in the center of their line were 20 doctors, fully armed. At the head rode Wapol, bloated and round, armored, with purple hair and a huge mouth, his chin fitted with an iron cylinder, mounted on a sturdy hippopotamus. Dalton stood at his side, with Chess and Kuromarimo nearby. Facing them at a distance was a single figure in a black overcoat and top hat. His hair was exaggerated into thick, long columns. Hiluluk had come, hoping to cure the Dr. 20, but seeing the formation against him, he knew he had walked into a trap. He wasn't angry at being deceived. He had come on the off chance the report was true. No one is sick. That's truly wonderful. Nothing major will happen to this country. Fortunately, it was only a trick to lure me out, he murmured to himself. Relief made him go weak-kneed, and he involuntarily sank to his knees in the cold snow, tears warming his face. Heh, are you already scared stiff? Useless trash. Wapol sneered and picked his nose, waving dismissively. With a uniform mechanical sound, the soldiers raised their muskets, dark void muzzles aimed at the man who only wanted to heal his country. Hiluluk paid them little mind. He sat cross-legged, opened his briefcase, and took out some simple medical instruments and a bottle of wine. He poured a cup, then, without fear, addressed the soldiers as if on a podium, voice ringing out across the snowy plain. When do you think a person dies? Is it when their heart is pierced by a bullet? No. Is it when they contract an incurable disease? No. It is when a person is completely forgotten by the world. As his words thundered across the field, a tremor ran through the ranks. Soldiers and doctors alike hesitated. Hiluluk raised the wine cup high, smiling as if he were at a banquet. Even if I disappear, my dream will still come true. It will save the hearts of the people. My life, it was truly wonderful. His smile was pure, radiant, like someone among dear friends. He would spend his last breath offering this ailing country one final medicinal truth. I'm sorry, Chopper. Forgive me for how I drove you away. A flash of sorrow crossed his face, then he brought the cup to his lips. Crack! The wine cup exploded in his hand as if struck by an invisible bullet. Wine splashed over the pristine snow, leaving a dark, wet stain. Oh dear, if I let you die, how would I explain it to Chopper? A man's voice said, tinged with annoyance, leisurely carrying across the field. That little fellow is really looking forward to me curing your terminal illness. Chapter 138, Wapol Calamity Kane. Dalton's cry rang out, and his right hand instinctively tightened around the giant iron shovel until his knuckles whitened. Was the thing he'd feared most about to happen? Wapol, standing beside him, didn't know what had gone through Dalton's head. He only saw the man who had appeared out of nowhere and found him unbearable. How dare he be so handsome? Pointing at Kane, Wapol barked, Dalton, go kill this pretty boy who showed up for this king. Ah, me? Dalton stared at the king in disbelief. Are you kidding? If not me, then who? I'm the captain of the kingdom's guard. Wapol's glare was sharp and impatient. Are you refusing my orders? Remember, I am the king. He'd been looking for an opportunity to teach this constant objector a lesson. Dalton, protected by old ties to Wapol's father, popped up every few days to oppose Wapol's decisions, acting as if the country would collapse if he wasn't listened to. Dalton's face twitched, his heart thudded, but in the end, he bowed his head. As you command, King Wapol. His body convulsed and swelled. Thick horns thrust from his temples, his muscles swelled, and a coarse pelt covered him. He had activated a zoan, the Ushi Ushi no Mi, model bison, human bison form. Dalton's right foot became a cloven hoof, and he stamped, sending snow flying. Like a battering ram launched at full force, he charged toward Kane. Be careful, Dalton's a devil fruit user. In that form, his charge could knock out 100 men. Hiluluk cried, tensing beside Kane. Get out of here. Tell Chopper I'm sorry. At Dalton's roar of violent attack, the giant shovel drew a deadly arc toward Kane's chest. Kane, however, seemed unbothered. He turned slowly and looked at the panicked doctor behind him. Save your farewells for Chopper. I'm not going to be your messenger. Hiluluk wanted to protest, but all his focus was on Dalton's incoming strike. He lunged forward and grabbed Kane's clothes to shove him away, but it was like trying to move a mountain. Kane didn't budge. He barely shifted his posture. Then, to everyone's shock, the shovel blade halted inches from Kane's chest as if frozen mid-swing. How? How is that possible? Two slender fingers clamped around the iron shovel. Dalton's neck veins stood out as he poured all his strength into the weapon, face flushed, but the shovel wouldn't move another millimeter. Wapol, watching from the rear, screamed, Dalton, you useless fool! Kill him for me! Dalton, still locked in the contest of strength, would have cursed Wapol if he could have spared the breath. Kane yawned softly with mock boredom. This kind of king, why protect him? If you ask me, rebel and be done with it. Rebel against Wapol? Hiluluk's pupils widened. Wapol was the king of a world government-aligned country. If anything happened to him, it would draw marine and even world government attention. You'll be hunted down. Dalton, who had a sliver of hope, piped up. Exactly. Removing the king will make you an enemy of the world government. If you stop now, I'll guarantee you and Hiluluk safe passage. Kane smiled without answering and looked instead at Hiluluk. Do you really believe your own death will heal the country? Hiluluk fell silent. He knew the odds were tiny, but he lifted his chin and answered as if the sky itself could witness it. If the chance exists, shouldn't we try? Even if it's small, shouldn't we try to do what's right? Kane watched him a long moment, seeing the pure idealism that drove him. Then, without warning, Kane released the shovel. Dalton's heart leapt. Before he could react, Kane's hand closed over Dalton's face, Not a squeeze, but a firm, crushing grip that covered his whole head. There was a blur of motion, a dull thud as snow and frozen earth exploded beneath them, and Dalton hit the ground and was instantly out cold. Kane stood, not even looking at the fallen captain, and walked toward Wapol. "Want to heal your country?" Kane asked, his voice calm but carried on the biting wind so everyone heard it. "The method is simpler than you think. It's only that no one here has ever dared to try it." The soldiers, staring at the unconscious Dalton, aimed their rifles in terror at the approaching figure. Their hands, trained and steady, suddenly trembled as if stricken. "Shoot! Shoot him! Shoot this bastard for the king!" Wapol's shriek was almost comical, a fat man whose tail had been trod upon. The troops pulled their triggers in a flurry. Bullets rained toward Kane like a storm. Kane didn't dodge. The lead struck his body and simply bounced off his outer skin with metallic clinks, unable to pierce. Then the unthinkable happened. As his boots hit the snow, the footsteps themselves seemed to press down on the hearts of those watching. One by one, soldiers and doctors felt their vision darken. They went weak as if a hand pressed on their chests. Their knees folded, and they slumped to the ground, unconscious like dumplings dropping into a pot. "What is happening?" Wapol wailed, gripping the hippo saddle. Sweat rolled down his face. The scene exceeded his comprehension. Under his horrified gaze, the figure had already walked up to him. "You don't even know how, Shoku," Kane asked. "You're a real failure of a king. Show some dignity. Surrender." "Impossible," Wapol snapped and then shoved two trusted lieutenants forward. "Chess, Kuromarimo, come here. The king is preparing his ultimate move." They leapt to block Kane, but what happened next was grotesque. Wapol opened his mouth unnaturally wide and swallowed them whole in a single gulp. Kane watched with his arms crossed. He didn't intervene. After a moment, Wapol's throat pulsed and he spat out a strange fused figure. Two men somehow conjoined, one riding on the other's head like a malformed puppet. Kane inspected the thing with a raised brow. It was hardly impressive. Wapol laughed triumphantly, certain his display had cowed his enemy. "Scared now? If you surrender and swear loyalty to this king, I'll promote you to captain of the guard." Kane ignored him and looked toward his allies descending the mountain on the flame clouds created by Kozuki Hiyori. Yamato and the others landed, and Kane's gaze flicked to them. "Ace, Zoro, Sanji, anyone want to stretch their legs?" The fused minion was laughably weak. Ace, Zoro, and Sanji all thought the same, but since Kane was too lazy to move, they settled it with rock, paper, scissors. Ace lost. There was no contest. In this part of the Grand Line, where hockey was still a rarity, the Mera Mera no Mi made Ace devastating. One fire fist and a torrent of flames sent the synthetic human flying. It was over in a blink. Wapol, watching his creations destroyed so easily, panicked. He abandoned any pretense of defense and scuttled back into the castle, threatening in a squeaky voice, "You'll pay for this. Prepare to die." "Shall we pursue him?" Kozuki Hiyori asked softly when she landed beside Kane. "No rush," Kane said. He let his eyes linger on the castle. "I want to see how far his berries will stretch." From inside the castle came a grinding mechanical roar. The heavy gates were forced inward from the inside. Wapol emerged, having transformed himself into a 10-meter-tall walking fortress. His arms were hollow cannon barrels, muskets lined his chest, and tank-like treads replaced his legs. "Ha ha! Prepare to die! This king will slowly torture you all to death!" Wapol bellowed, delighted with his own show of power. But instead of fear, the gathered saw only curiosity and amusement. "Wow, what kind of power is that? So interesting!" Yamato exclaimed. Kane explained matter-of-factly. He ate things and turned them into part of himself. The Baku Baku no Mi lets its user transform whatever they eat into their own flesh and blood. He went on to explain the fruit's deeper value. The Baku Baku no Mi is a bizarre paramecia. Beyond turning eaten items into parts of your body or synthesizing odd features, its most remarkable application is the ability to assimilate properties of what it consumes, even the abilities of other devil fruit users in some cases. From a versatility standpoint, it's more powerful than some fusion fruits, though its scope is different. Robin, watching Kane, nodded slowly. "Lord Kane, is he the one you were looking for?" "Yes." Kane's voice was cool. "Aside from these crude tricks, the real value of the Baku Baku no Mi is its ability to perfectly fuse metals, to make new alloys that don't exist in nature. Judge's battle suits, future weapons, new materials, they can all be born from that power. Kane thought back to Wapol's original story. After being driven out of Drum Island, Wapol hit rock bottom, fighting with wild dogs for scraps. One day, by accident, he swallowed certain minerals and synthesized them into a shape memory alloy, Wapometal, and suddenly became rich and famous. He founded the Wapol conglomerate and married a beauty queen. It was a classic rags to riches tale. But then Wapol grew complacent. Having made his fortune with Wapometal, he stopped trying to develop any new alloys. Such waste. Kane's lips twisted. Without complex industrial processes, by simply eating raw materials in the right proportions, new alloys could be made. The man had a God-given talent for material science, and wasting it was a crime. Kane would make Wapol contribute to the beast's technological development and to improving the lives of the people under their banner. Chapter 139, Replacing the King, Recruiting Dr. Kureha. All right, playtime's over, Kane said with a light chuckle, his face as relaxed as if he'd just finished a trifling game. He'd already seen the munch berry. There was no reason to keep toying with Wapol. The contempt in his manner made Wapol tremble with fury, about to curse, when suddenly his body lightened and his vision swooned. An irresistible force seized him, and his massive iron form was lifted like a toy. After a dizzying spin through the air, Wapol crashed onto the snow with a heavy, earth-shaking thud, sending up a spray of powder. Wah! The blow dazed Wapol so completely that his fused weapon body fell apart. He gasped and spewed out the cache of guns and ammunition he'd just swallowed. In moments, the war machine collapsed back into his fat, bloated self. The force was just right. Dazed, but no brain damage. Kane withdrew his hand with a satisfied smile and strolled toward the sprawled king. Wapol had only just come around. He shook his head and squinted up at the figure closing in. "Don't come over!" Panic turned his voice to a shriek. He propped one hand on the ground and scooted back, the other hand flailing to block his face, as if not seeing the danger could make it disappear. It was a coward's wish, useless against reality. Kane stopped over him and cast a shadow that swallowed Wapol whole. "Wapol, come with me." Kane's tone was flat, an order that brooked no argument. Wapol froze, torn between hope and terror. Maybe his life was being spared? He shuddered. This man was vicious. What kind of end would follow obedience? One day he might step out of line and be killed in exile. No, he could not go. This country still needs its king. Without my leadership, they'll get worse and worse. He flailed his hands and forced on a posture of concern for the nation, puffing himself up as if that made it true. Kane's mouth twitched. Was he putting on a show? A sharp slap cracked through the air. Wapol slapped a hand to his cheek. A crimson handprint bloomed. You hit me?" His eyes widened in horror, tears spilling down his face. "My father never hit me." Kane's face didn't change. "That's why he couldn't stop you from becoming this idiotic mess," he said coldly, then leaned in, his shadow like a weight on Wapol's chest. "Remember, what I just said was an order, not a request." As for the king, Kane straightened and stroked his chin thoughtfully. A country without a king doesn't run well. Hope surged in Wapol's eyes as if someone had thrown him a lifeline. "Then let that guy be the one." Kane casually pointed to the still unconscious Dalton down the slope. "He's a king. How hard can it be? Drum Kingdom's foundation is solid. It's long been a medical powerhouse. Member countries of the world government have one duty above all: send the heavenly tribute on time. That's a huge sum. Drum's coffers are deep. If Dalton sleeps in the castle all day, the country can still function. The world government only cares about the tribute. Whose king doesn't matter." No, you can't do this. You can't." Wapol's protests dissolved into frantic struggling. "You're wrong. I can." Kane's eyes turned cold. He cut Wapol off, grabbed him by the collar like a chick, and ignoring the Pig King's screams, hauled him over to Dalton. He gestured at Hiluluk to wake the sleeping prince. Dalton came to slowly, rubbing his eyes, dazed. "I have decided. From today on, you will be the king of this country." "Huh?" Dalton blinked, half asleep and bewildered. Kane offered no further explanation. He looked at the ashen Wapol and ordered, "Now go to the castle broadcast room and tell the whole nation you have voluntarily abdicated in favor of Dalton." That was how, on his first day on Drum Island, Kane nonchalantly replaced the king. The initial shock, disbelief, and eventual cheers of the people below the mountain when Walpole's broadcast reached them were a story of its own. Dalton did not betray the trust. His first decree as king was to abolish the hateful doctor expulsion order and immediately send envoys to find the doctors Walpole had driven away, begging them to return and restore Drum's medical glory. Inside the castle hall, Hiluluk watched Kane and the new king with a small, hopeful smile. "See? Isn't this country starting to get better?" Before anyone could answer, Chopper burst in his reindeer form, panting and carrying Dr. Kureha in his arms. "Chopper!" Hiluluk's heart leapt. Seeing that little figure and hearing his cry struck him to the very core. In that instant, he felt alive in a way he had not in months. He reached out, and Chopper tumbled into his embrace. I thought I'd never see you again. Hiluluk?" "I'm sorry, Chopper. I'm sorry." Hiluluk hugged the trembling reindeer as if he might never let go, tears tracking down his face and spattering Chopper's fur. "It was my fault. I shouldn't have forced you to leave. You must have suffered so much these past few days." He stroked Chopper's healing wounds with trembling fingers. Dr. Kureha, standing quietly to the side, watched the reunion with an unusual softness in her stern eyes. She did not interrupt. Kane, oblivious to the tenderness, produced a small glass bottle from his pocket and tossed it to Hiluluk. Hiluluk fumbled it open and blinked at the liquid. "This is... Perhaps it's something that can save your life," Kane said lightly. Dr. Kureha frowned. She knew Hiluluk's disease, a hopeless illness no medicine had cured. Could this pirate possibly have an answer? Chopper brightened. "Hiluluk, try it, quickly." Faced with Chopper's pleading eyes, Hiluluk did not hesitate. He pulled the cork and drank it all. If it were poison, so be it. He would take it gladly if it meant keeping Chopper safe. "Why does this taste a bit like tears?" he murmured, then felt a gentle, strong warmth flood from his throat through his limbs. He straightened, amazed at how light he felt, how easily he could breathe. I feel better." Chopper nearly exploded with joy. Dr. Kureha, who rarely betrayed surprise, rushed forward and grabbed Hiluluk's wrist, giving him a brisk, thorough check. "Strange, your symptoms have indeed subsided," she muttered, almost in disbelief. "Unscientific." Kane chuckled. "Of course it's unscientific. It's the power of a devil fruit." If a devil fruit could make the impossible happen, then this suppression, however mysterious, made sense. Still, Kureha insisted on running full diagnostics with the castle's equipment. The results were a mix of hope and sorrow. The good news, Hiluluk's symptoms were miraculously suppressed. The bad news, it wasn't a cure. His remaining life had only been extended, from 10 days to 5 months. "It's okay, Chopper," Hiluluk said instead of despairing. He stroked the little reindeer's head. "To live 5 more months, to spend more time with you, that's the greatest gift." Chopper clung to him and buried his face in Hiluluk's chest, trying to hold on to the life that still slipped away. "Things may still turn," Kane said, eyes at once practical and mercenary. "The dose you took was a weakened version. If the devil fruit user themselves applied the power properly, there might be a full cure. But that would require you to come with me." Kane admired Hiluluk's idealism. Saving his life was nothing to him. It was a simple gesture, and Hiluluk, besides, wasn't useless. His odd experiments had shown some talent for biological research. They might prove useful. Hiluluk, who still wanted to heal his country and watch Chopper grow, accepted without hesitation. Chopper followed immediately. Dr. Kureha produced a bottle of the royal household's top-grade plum wine, sipped it slowly, and watched Kane and his crew with a critical eye. She had lived long and seen many pirates, but she found this crew peculiar. They had high bounties, yet they treated an injured little reindeer with care, kept solemn bargains, and after kidnapping a king, they had kindly set the country on a better course. Were these really vicious pirates? Whatever they were, the outcome pleased her. She glanced at Chopper, again radiant at Hiluluk's side, and a faint smile tugged at her lips. She took another gulp of wine. Kane didn't intend to let her wander off. "Dr. Kureha, interested in working for me?" "Looking for this old woman? My fees aren't cheap," she said, raising an eyebrow and shaking her wine bottle. Playful, but not refusing. Kane's eyes lit up. 10 million berries? She started to answer, but Kane cut in. 100 million. 100 million berries a year as a base salary, not including allowances. Food and lodging provided, personal safety guaranteed. Dr. Correja paused, tempted. Kane added with a grin, plus unlimited top-grade plum wine and your favorite pickled plums. Deal, she said almost without thinking, grabbing Kane's hand as if to make sure he didn't change his mind. For Kane, it felt like finding treasure. For Dr. Correja, it felt like a new life. Both smiled with satisfaction, and Drum Kingdom on that cold day had already taken its first steps toward being a different place. Chapter 140, Arrival in Alabasta. Hero Crocodile. Bang, bang, bang. A series of cannon shots split the sky like trumpets heralding a miracle. Everyone on Drum Island looked up just in time to see a huge, exquisitely beautiful pink cloud of cherry blossoms bloom high above the harbor. Countless petals drifted down slowly, the island's special farewell for Hiluluk. The Rayquaza pulled away from the dock. Hiluluk stood alone at the bow, staring at the scene he had pictured in his dreams so many times. 2 hot lines of tears ran down his weathered cheeks. Correja leaned on the rail, watching her old friend's trembling back. A faint smile touched her lips as she raised a hand and took a long draught of her prized plum wine. Under that grand rain of cherry blossoms, the Rayquaza finally left Drum Island. Next stop, the Alabasta Kingdom. Alabasta was a major power in the first half of the Grand Line, 10 million people and a standing army of 600,000. To Kane, 10 million barely qualified as superpower material. Still, compared to most seafaring nations that had only one port city, Alabasta was a giant. Ordinary pirates tended to steer clear of it. Besides, Alabasta's vast land was mostly desert, similar to Egypt, only the oases along the Santora River were truly habitable. Its economy was always stretched thin. If not for its sheer size and population, Kane suspected it might even struggle to pay the world government's tribute. None of that mattered to Kane. There was nothing to loot here, no riches, no talents worth recruiting. He had come for one thing, the secret letter the first Queen Lily had left for her younger brother. On deck, Wapol hugged himself in a corner, eyes wide with terror. "What exactly are you going to do to the king?" He whimpered. "Don't worry," Kane said with a chuckle. "I only want your body." Wapol screamed, voice rising an octave. "What? You can't make me sell my chastity." Black lines of irritation popped on Kane's forehead. "Who said anything about that? I want your ability, your help. I want you to work for me." He squatted down, patted Wapol's shoulder, and put on a businesslike smile. "Use your Baku Baku no Mi, munch munch fruit, ability to research and make new alloys for me, and I'll never treat you unfairly." But Kane's expression hardened. An invisible pressure seemed to hang over Wapol. "If you even pretend to obey me while hiding ulterior motives," he said slowly, "I promise you, being alive will become your worst punishment." Wapol went perfectly pale and nodded frantically, swearing he would serve Kane in life and in death, sounding like someone ready to drag his ancestors from their graves to vouch for him. After that little interlude, the Rayquaza resumed its steady course toward Alabasta. Days later, they reached Alabasta's offshore waters. The endless golden desert grew clearly visible on the horizon. Compared to the winter island of Drum, the air grew hotter the closer they got. Wapol had long since shed his heavy fur coat and now wore only a vest and shorts, looking like a very elderly retiree. If Kane hadn't warned him, he probably wouldn't have worn anything at all. The most miserable person on deck, however, wasn't Wapol. At least Wapol could slough off clothes. Chopper, being a reindeer, couldn't exactly peel himself like a coat. "It's so hot," Chopper moaned, sprawled on the deck with his tongue hanging out as if the heat would lift his soul from his body. Fortunately, there were plenty of people aboard with cold abilities. Yamato pressed a finger to a basin of water and froze a block of ice in seconds. "Ah! Alive again!" Chopper hugged the ice like a drowning man clinging to a straw, pressing his whole body against it with eyes narrowed in bliss. Bonnie looked on enviously. She'd have loved to hug an ice block too, but Kuma, loving his daughter as he did, couldn't allow such things. Luckily, Kane could manipulate the weather. "Icy wind," he murmured. He conjured a thin but steady stream of cool air that carved a strip of chill across the deck. Completely out of tune with the surrounding desert heat, it was like a portable central air conditioner. Kane would have enjoyed the sight of the crew cooling off, but he wasn't the only man aboard. The breeze was a perfect relief. Everyone sighed with gratitude. Kane sat back beside a pile of meteorite fragments he'd hauled from space, picked one up as if nothing had happened, and casually crunched it like a cookie, absorbing the cosmic energy within. Yamato swung her long, fair legs over the rail, as unaffected by the heat as if she were in winter. The Rayquaza sailed into the Santora River and headed upriver toward the capital, Alubarna. Flying the beast's pirate's flag, the ship caused alarm along both banks. The name Calamity Kane spread like wildfire downriver. Calamity Kane is here! In the royal palace in Alubarna, King Cobra stiffened at the news. Kane, the calamity of the beast's pirates, here? It's true, Your Majesty. I confirmed it from the sky. Pell, vice captain of the royal guard and a Falcon Zoan user, declared, kneeling. Cobra's eyes narrowed. Take me to him at once. He summoned the royal guard. He would go himself to greet them. Greet. That was the only sensible stance. Hope for the mercy of the strong rather than resist and be trampled. Father, I want to go too. A blue-haired little girl called, bursting from the inner chambers. She'd been eavesdropping and couldn't miss such an opportunity. No, Vivi. Stay in the palace, Cobra said, rubbing his forehead, voice uncharacteristically firm. He'd always indulged his daughter, but Calamity Kane was no ordinary guest. Even the Marines and the world government had little recourse against him. A small country like Alabasta would be helpless. Cobra couldn't risk it. He hurried away with his guards. Vivi watched his departing back, eyes bright and curious, an idea already forming. Yuba, the trading hub in western Alabasta, was in chaos. Bastards! Hand over all your berries and valuables. A man with a savage scar over one eye barked, firing 2 shots into the air. The gunshots sent people screaming and scattering, until the scarred man's cronies herded them back into the street like cattle, pinning everyone at gunpoint. Hurry up! Don't dawdle! Hand everything over! Otherwise, he taunted, spinning his pistol, my gun doesn't care who you are. Ha ha! His men laughed like hyenas. A young man tried bravely, if foolishly, aren't you afraid the kingdom's army will come? Bang! The answer was merciless. The young man fell, clutching a blood-soaked thigh, and the crowd's last resistance shattered. The sight of blood drained color from their faces. These men would kill. Who would save them? Humph, the army? The leader sneered, blowing smoke. By the time they crawl here, they'll be too late to do anything but count corpses. My brothers and I haven't eaten meat in a while. Who knows what might happen? Reluctantly, one person began fumbling for money. Others followed. Submission spread like infection. Just as despair settled in, stop! A deep, gravelly voice rang from above. The scar-faced man looked up, and on a nearby rooftop stood a figure everyone in Alabasta knew. Slick-back hair, a long horizontal scar across his face, a thick cigar clenched in his mouth, and where his left hand should be, a golden hook. The sight made the robber's knees go weak. Wait, I can return it, right now, he babbled, suddenly cowed. Mr. Crocodile, someone cried. Our hero's here. Where Crocodile appeared, people breathed again. He'd repeatedly cleared pirate troublemakers before the royal army could arrive and had become a beloved guardian of the common folk. Crocodile didn't haggle. He struck. Crescent Dune, he barked. His right arm turned to coarse sand and grew into a giant crescent-shaped blade. He swung it and swept the bandits off their feet. In an instant, the robbers were swallowed by a rushing tide of quicksand that left them immobilized and stripped of moisture. No one noticed one pirate who'd narrowly missed the sweep and stood trembling just outside the sand's edge. The men who'd been captured shriveled as if their water had been sucked out. They fell to the ground like mummies, lifeless and cracked. The stolen goods tumbled from their stiff hands. Crocodile's face softened for a moment as he looked down on the terrified crowd. Go, take back what belongs to you. Thank you, Mr. Crocodile, people cried, gratitude and awe pouring out. With their valuables returned and death averted, their reverence peaked. Crocodile vanished around a corner, as quiet and inscrutable as he'd come. A bit further away, a pirate who'd almost been taken stood up and brushed off his disguise, now exaggerated makeup and long false lashes. Mr. 2, Bon Clay, approached and bowed. President, I've recovered all the funds we put into hiring those fools, Han, he reported in a low voice. Crocodile nodded without praise. If Bon Clay couldn't handle such a simple task, he didn't deserve the title of Mr. 2. When will the next group arrive? Crocodile asked. Bon Clay hesitated, biting his lip. President, pirate mortality in Alabasta's been high. It's been hard to find reckless pirates willing to come here to die. Even if we hire them secretly, there aren't many takers. Crocodile studied him for a moment, then find them as soon as possible. My plan to win the people's trust cannot be interrupted. Bon Clay breathed out in relief and nodded quickly. He added another report, this one with a sharp edge. Calamity Kane has arrived.